Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, and a big thank you to all of my viewers, all of my fans who've been tuning in. I have been loving every second of doing all of these conversations on the Beatles, and I have two very special guests on the program this time. In a way, this is kind of unique because it's a reunion of sorts. I don't think the three of us have done a show together since my years on WDHA, a rock station in New Jersey, where I did my Beatles program, then called the All Request Beatles Show. Didn't change until every little thing until I was on XM radio. But for 10 years, from 1983 through 1993, I did my radio program on Sunday mornings. And very often, I would have either one of these gentlemen or both of them on the show. And one of them, well, actually, you should know both of them by name, but one of them that I'll introduce right now has been the executive editor for Beatlefan magazine for quite a long time now. It's written a lot of great articles through the years and just wrote an article on the very subject that we're going to talk about on this show, which is all about Let It Be. And for several years, he was actually part of my weekly podcast, Things We Said Today. And he's also been a guest on Things We Said Today since then, on my other talk show podcast, Talk More Talk, and on my channel here, and that's Al Sussman. Hi, Al.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
It's great to have you back on here, and it's great to have it in this particular combo.
Absolutely.
And my other guest, yes, my other guest is Tom Frangione. And as I was saying before, both these gentlemen were on my show quite frequently in my 10 years on WDHA. And quite often, they would be on either individually or the two of them together. I know that what was pretty much a common thing at the end of every year, we would do a year-end review show in which we talked about the highlights of the previous year for Beatle fans and also provided a wish list for the coming year. And that was one of my favorite moments in doing my show and all these years to have these two guys on. And Tom Frangione has done a ton of work on the Beatles. He also has written for Beatlefan. For several years, he also wrote for the same fanzine that I wrote for and my future wife wrote for, and that's Good Day Sunshine. He's also contributed to Joe Johnson's Beatle Brunch. He's at every Fest for Beatles Fans where he helps out, doing interviews, introducing people on stage, doing all sorts of contests on stage, battle of the bands, that kind of stuff. And for several years now, he's been very active on Sirius XM's Beatles Channel, where he co-hosts several programs. Two of them, one called Fab Fourum, the other Way Beyond Compare. Is it Way Beyond Compare Rarity Show or just Way Beyond Compare?
It's the title of the show is Way Beyond Compare. It's a look at the Beatles rarities. Yep. And
there's a third show. Yeah, called Apple Jam, which is once a month.
Yeah, it's a new episode once a month. It repeats on that one's on a weird schedule. It debuts the first Wednesday of each month and then repeats throughout the weekend. Then it doesn't air for a week. Then it follows that same schedule again, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it's off for a week, and then you start the following month. But shameless plug time, it's always available on the SXM app. If those times aren't convenient, but it is a new episode monthly, and I co-host that one with the great David Frick, who was the editor of Rolling Stone for many, many years, one of the contributing editors there, and is a big presence on Sirius, not just on the Beatles channel, but on Volume and some other channels that he lends his talents to. He's just a font of knowledge, Beatles and otherwise, but most importantly, he is a true fan. He really ups the game over there. We have him as our guest host every now and again if somebody's on vacation on the forum, and it's always great to have him in the booth with us.
Okay. Well, towards the end of the show, we're going to talk more in detail about those programs that you co-host on SiriusXM. I want to make sure, because it's always easy for me to forget things, Al, that you just contributed a piece also for Bruce Spizer's new book, which is about Magical Mystery Tour and Yellow Submarine. So
I did. I did. Basically, it's as I call it, the Beatles album series team, which is myself, Bill King, Frank Daniels, Piers Hemmingson, and Bruce. And basically, what I've been doing is in each of the books from Sergeant Pepper onward, is basically looking at kind of the news of the year, taking pretty much the same formula that I used with the book I wrote, Changing Times, and applying it to the particular period that we're dealing with each particular album, and but also including the Beatles activities as well.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to reading that one, as I have the previous books. So, and hopefully we'll have you on this channel to talk about that book. Not sure with Bruce or not, but you know that that's going to be happening very soon. So, yeah. So before we talk about Let It Be, because it was such a big hot item a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure you guys both saw the trailer for Get Back, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were about that. Tom, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I was really turned on. If we go back, I guess it's about 9 months. It was around Christmas, right, when we saw that first. It wasn't a trailer. Peter Jackson was very specific that it wasn't the trailer, but it was just kind of like a preview reel. And obviously, the first thing that sticks out in that, as well as the trailer, is the quality of the restoration of the film. I mean, this thing looks like it could have been shot yesterday.
I know.
And,
Really?
and the audio in the trailer kind of reminded me of when I first saw Magical Mystery Tour, the cleaned up version on DVD, which they showed in theaters. The audio, you really get to hear like all the background chatter really clear. And in Mystery Tour, there was all kinds of little in jokes and stuff like that. And here you can hear George, and the band talking, and he even says to I guess it's to Michael Lindsay Hogg, you're zeroing in on our conversation here, and you've now just heard the conversation. So this is going to be, from a technical perspective, I would bet the ranch it's going to be nothing short of a marvel. What I've liked about what I've seen, and even now, we're starting to get some more reading material. It was a great article with Giles this week in Variety. Peter Jackson's done one or two. And we, even in the Get Back book, I was very, very, I hate to say pleased to read the bad stuff. I was pleased that it didn't come off with what I kind of feared in the beginning, that it would be some sort of a whitewash. When from the outset of this project, it's been, oh no, everybody thinks Let It Be was miserable and terrible and dark and dreary. We're going to show you just how great friends they were and how much they loved spending time together in January of 1969. Now, when you go back to contemporaneous interviews at the time, there were a lot of bad adjectives that all the Beatles assigned to it. Misery, dreary, dreadful, painful, whatever they used. And I think everything I've seen so far, including the trailer, is going to get us to something that should be pleasingly balanced. So, I mean, I was reading the Get Back book, as I'm sure you guys have over the past week or two. And
absolutely,
not for anything, by the time they get to like January 7th or 8th, I'm looking for where John and George are going to hang Paul out a window somewhere. I mean, they just, you can feel the tension building. It's very well written. It's, it presents a good balance. There's some great constructive moments as a band where they're helping each other write and things like that. So, with regard to the trailer specifically, Ken, again, what a taster. I mean, it's coming. I can't believe it's only 5 weeks away or whatever it is. We've been waiting so long, and they've kicked the can down the road a couple of times with the release date, but hey, in this case, we're getting 6 hours as opposed to what was going to be a 2-hour theatrical. The wait hopefully will be the big payoff. I'm very comfortable, I think, knowing that it's not going to be what I might have feared at the beginning, just a complete retelling. We went through this with the White Album. a couple years ago on the 50th anniversary, and we had Giles on the show on the Fab Forum, and he says, well, the tapes don't lie. I don't hear any fights. I said, well, yeah, that's because Ringo left and your father left because because they were fighting too much. They're not on the tape. And he kind of gave that, oh yeah, I reckon, so, yeah, we're not going to hear any fighting with George for, January 11th through 20th. We're for sure not going to hear that.
That's true.
I'm
wondering how they're going to handle that in the film when George walks out.
I think I think it's going to take, since it's 3 nights, very much like the book. It's like a play in 3 acts. It's Twickenham, and that pretty much ends with George walking out, even though they hang around there a couple more days. Then it's Apple, then it's the roof, and the studio performances on the 31st. So I'm feeling okay about how this should all play out. I think one of the best things, just the last point about the the tension and the darkness and all that, what has happened here, I think a lot of people for years said, oh, and what about the big blow up in the movie? George and Paul have this big row. Wait a minute. If anybody that's watching this show who's been in a band, I used this example last night, and fortunately my 2 co-hosts thought it was on point. I said, if you think that's bad, go watch that History of the Eagles where Glenn Frey threatens Don Felder's life on stage. Yeah. That's fighting in a band. Okay? Saying, gee, don't play your lead, to echo the melody line. That stuff happens every day in a band. Okay, it happens every day. That was not what caused George to walk out. Okay, that's not a fight. That's hey, we're trying to figure out how to get this piece of the song done. The author of it, Paul, is thinking, I kind of have a vision for this in my head. Go with it. It wasn't saying, George, you're not capable of playing this, or what kind of garbage solo was it. None of that. Right. And I think it's going to put it's going to put things back in perspective, I think.
I've said many times.
And a lot of people.
Yeah. That argument, I think, is so overblown, really.
Yeah. A lot of people forget that at that point, they were all still in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I've said this for a long time because it's been, I'm not a musician, but
I know what's coming.
knowing people who are in bands and have been in bands over the years, is that they, whether they're in their teens or in their 20s, they tend to be dicks to each other. They whether it's money, whether it's women, whether it's musical differences, whatever, they just tend to be dicks to each other, and to a great extent that was the case, especially in the way that John and Paul treated George, like a junior partner.
What you said before, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
No, what Tom said about the Get Back book, the only thing that I noticed early on is how much George seemed to be ignored. Every time he said, I don't really want to do a concert, it's like they walked all over him. They didn't really hear what he was saying, Yeah. So I can feel the frustration in George throughout the whole thing.
Exactly. Right. Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
But the as far as first the teaser and then the trailer, I mean, the first thing I noticed was just, as Tom said, was just the visual aspect. The fact that especially the stuff from Twickenham. Because in the film, which of course had been blown up from 16 millimeter to 35 millimeter as per Alan Klein, and in the theaters, that those sequences were all very dark looking, and the difference, even just in the teaser from last December, let alone the trailer, that material looks much better.
Yeah.
But what Tom was saying, I have to back him up on that, because I think a lot of people were deciding immediately that, oh, this is going to be a whitewash. It's it's going to be a complete revision of what it actually was. Well, a lot of people, unfortunately, there are a lot of people, especially a lot of younger people, who don't know what it actually was, who don't know the story,
Right.
And but even in the trailer, I noticed that there is a better balance. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
What I found interesting was that it was almost like they were kind of giving you a different narrative of this story. It's like, that moment, and this is my favorite moment, when George asked John, how many songs do we have ready? And John
None.
says, none.
None.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the story of, how do we get everything done by the end of the month?
Yeah.
How do we get a new album done? How do we get the concert done? That's like the new narrative and the challenge of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can hear, for as much as to Al's point about, is this a rewrite, right? One of the common themes for years has been, that the Rooftop was, they didn't know till the last minute they were going to do this. It was kind of an off the top of their head, spur of the moment kind of thing. You hear in there, a week in advance, you hear John saying, if we can learn 6 by next Thursday. They've got next Thursday picked out for the roof. They know they're going. Okay. And of course, we know when you take a step back, they didn't just, put all this equipment on the roof. It would have just fallen through. They had to do construction. And, Peter Asher has told that story many times. That, by the middle of the month, and certainly by the time they get to Apple, by the 21st, it's pretty much that's where they're going to be going. They know they're going to be doing a performance, but as we know, one of George's, conditions for coming back, no, big TV
no
special,
live concert.
no
Right.
live concert. We're not going on a boat loaded with all kinds of fans, and
Right.
we're not doing that. So, it helps put that timeline in perspective, which is kind of cool. When I heard John use the term next Thursday, I'm like, yeah, the Rooftop was a Thursday. That's right. So that was kind of cool. And one of the other timeline moments, I think, if we're done talking about the trailer, one of the, just in terms of just using the term the timelines, one of the great clips in the box set is a story we've heard many times. George is writing something, and the placeholder lyrics about a pomegranate or loves me like a cauliflower or whatever they're using. George slides in something, and we can talk about the artistic collaboration of that later, which I'd like to do because it's kind of interesting. But George says, yeah, I've been kicking this one around for 6 months. Okay, get your calendar out, go back 6 months. They're smack in the middle of the White Album.
Right.
We heard nothing about it in the White Album box set, but when you look at the timeline now, if that song been kicking around since the summer of '68, doesn't come out for literally over a year till the early fall of '69, right? That it didn't pass muster on the White Album, or wasn't completed, whatever. Still isn't completed when they're doing Let It Be, and the next set of sessions when they go to Abbey Road, he's got it nailed. Okay, and I mean, as we heard from the demo on the anthology, the lyrics are certainly nailed down by February, which is good. It was I found that very interesting that dated back to the White Album, because remember when we got that White Album box set and there was that first unidentified take of Let It Be?
Yes.
Said, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Who knew that went back that far?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
now you got Let It Be and Something coming out of the gate during the White Album. I found that very, very interesting.
Well, once you study everything that they rehearsed during the Let It Be sessions, you're going to find brand new compositions, songs that ended up on Abbey Road, songs that ended up on their solo works. They were more prolific than you realize. It wasn't just the album of the time, So that's a fascinating thing. And then there are songs that they never ended up releasing at all.
Right.
That they were writing. So
yeah. And because this period, this 30-day period, I would dare say is the best or most thoroughly documented 30 days of their careers. I mean,
Oh, no
literally
question.
every day the tapes and the reels are there. And because, let's call this what it is, we've heard so much of it prior to this via bootlegs and tapes that people have traded and things like that. Out of the gate this time, I don't know, Ken, if it's been your experience, or Al, if this is what you're finding either on any of the Beatlefan boards or anything. Sometimes constructive, sometimes not. People are saying, well, gee, I wish they had put the I don't know, I'm making this up, the electric take of Two of Us, okay, or something,
Mhm.
because people have heard so much of this. You didn't have that when, let's say, the Sgt. Pepper album came out, because, well, I mean, how many different takes of, I don't know, Lovely Rita had you ever heard before that box set?
Right.
Zero,
Mhm.
right? So anything we got was new and exciting. Here, I think, particularly those who have collected the things, and guilty as charged. I'm not going to, hide that fact. There's been a lot of discussion about the, not just, well, you have Giles's mix, which obviously we have to talk about. We have the Glyn Johns mix, which we have to talk about, and then those two discs that are sandwiched in the middle, which, for a lot of the more ardent collector fans, I won't even say fans/collectors, I'll put collectors first in that case. That's kind of where their eyes went first, and they said, what else you got? Okay. And there's some points to make there, I think. There's some valid points in terms of what was chosen versus what was overlooked, but we'll open that can of worms later.
Okay.
And this goes back, actually, this goes back all the way to the actual release of the Let It Be album in May of '70, because it was the first time that that a Beatles album was almost an anticlimax, because for a good 4 or 5 months before, there were these bootlegs that had come out that Alan Kozin and I were buying in the early months of 1970. Come Back, the one with the silver cover, whatever that was called, and so we got to hear, like, for instance, Let It Be, the song Let It Be. The first time that I actually heard that song, it was by Aretha Franklin
Right.
on her This Girl's in Love with You album that came out in January.
Right.
But the next time I heard it was on one of those first bootlegs. And so a lot of people were already familiar with the songs from, at least from, they weren't aware of what it actually was from. Not, that it was the Glyn Johns acetate,
Right.
but they knew that there were different songs than were on the finished album.
Right.
So I can remember people, there was no such thing in those days as social media, thank goodness, other things. But there were people that were asking about, like, where's the walk? Where's the complete dig it? Things like that.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring up, and we should have a discussion about the Get Back book, but since you brought up Aretha Franklin, one of the things that I found interesting in the Get Back book, and I wrote it down here in my notes, that I think it was January 8th, '69, George Harrison suggested to Paul McCartney that he should give Let It Be to Aretha Franklin. And she had already, at that point, she must have recorded it, because her album came out January 15th. So it was already in the back
remember, you're talking a year later.
Oh,
her version
very
came
good.
out in January of '70.
Okay.
Right.
Very good there, Al.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I slipped there, folks. It'll happen.
yeah.
But maybe that whole idea came from George telling Paul to do that.
Because obviously, it hadn't been released, so Aretha had to have heard it from somewhere. So it's very possible that somebody at Apple, maybe a Peter Brown or Peter Asher, or somebody may have gotten the song to her.
Yeah. Well, from what I read, a copy of it went to Jerry Wexler.
Okay. There you go.
With the purpose of Aretha recording it, but
Right.
under the condition that it wouldn't be a single for her.
And actually, it was released as a single by her.
I thought Eleanor Rigby was a single.
Oh no, she for
Uh,
sure. Let It Be was a single for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. You could be right about that too. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up. But anyway, let's go to the history of Let It Be from the very beginning. And I think that in the booklet for the Let It Be box set, one of the things that I liked was they mentioned that originally, because Paul really wanted the group to do a concert again, since they hadn't performed in 3 years. And originally it was going to start with 3 nights at London's Chalk Farm Roundhouse. And they even
Roundhouse,
have
right?
an article that they printed in the
Yep.
booklet
Mhm.
about
Oh
that.
yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
going to be 3 nights. And they even mentioned that Mary Hopkin and Jackie
And
Lomax were going
Jackie
to be
Lomax
part of
had
it.
made it, yeah.
Well, if you remember Mark Lewison's long talk about the Beatles in 1968 at the White Album Symposium, he toward the end of it he did go into that to kind of promo or to promote the White Album. They were actually in the process of booking 3 nights, like you say, at the Roundhouse, and then they either got cold feet or whatever, and scratched it.
Yeah. And then there were a lot of exotic locations that were considered.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to ask you guys a question because I'm forgetting where I read this. It's probably in one of the transcripts. But somewhere, just based on what Paul was talking about with the other Beatles, I kind of got the impression of, unless we keep on working, the further and further you go from working together as a group, maybe you're less likely to want to do it some more, and it's kind of like, and I hate to use this equation, but when I graduated high school and I wasn't sure what I wanted to major in, I thought I'll take a year off and not go to college. And my parents said to me, don't do that, because if you take off from school, you're not going to go back. So it's kind of like that kind of feeling, you know, the Beatles, all four of them were kind of moving in different directions. Paul, I do believe, more than any of them, loved being a Beatle.
Mhm.
You know, John and George were definitely, they had other ideas at the time, although they still were, they still were fully engaged in being Beatles, but they were thinking about other ideas for their careers already. And maybe Paul was a little bit nervous that, you take more time off. It's already been like a month since the White Album came out, maybe. And then you got Ringo's getting involved with the Magic Christian. That's going to take some time away. The further you're away from working together, maybe the desire might not be as strong to keep the band together. Did you in any way sense that?
You know, I think you're right for sure, Paul. There was no secret there. Ringo always made light of it. The phone would ring and you knew it was him. We got to go back in the studio. It was interesting. I was listening actually just this morning to one of the specials that we'd put together at Sirius, and it had a great interview clip from George saying, well, he was very engaged. You used the right word there, Ken, at the start of 1970, saying, this could be great. I could do a solo album. John could do a solo album. Paul and Ringo can do solo albums. We can all do our solo thing because it would make you realize how much you want to get back to, pardon the pun, but get back to working together with those guys after being away from them. He had that, absence makes the heart grow fonder vision, which you wouldn't necessarily think from George up front, right? The start of these sessions, he's fresh back from visiting the band and Dylan, and he sees what how great, the collaborative effort can be when there's no star in the band, when everybody is focused on the same output. He's treated as an equal up there. Okay, that's completely different. Okay, so I think he now feels, I want to be in the band. Meanwhile, for years we've said, well, look, he's been playing with Clapton and Ravi Shankar and Dylan, and he says, I don't need this anymore. Okay? I think it's less, I don't need this anymore, and more actually of, I want this to be a band. I'm bringing songs, but hey, if they don't listen to them, what am I going to do? Talking about the band, the first track in the outtakes discs. George is there, and after the requisite Happy New Year's and Hare Krishnas, when everybody arrives at Twickenham, he says, "Well, yeah, I got this one, and it's kind of bandy. It's bandy." And the first time I heard it, I didn't make the connection of the Dylan band Woodstock thing. I said, it's one that has to be done by a band, meaning the Beatles. And, to me, that was always, as a collector of all the session tapes and everything, a song that great, All Things Must Pass. And the Beatles did it. They took, at least half a dozen passes through that in January. And never really, I don't think, ever really gave it a full-on serious attempt. It was almost, I hate to use the word patronizing, but they did it almost out of obligation. And obviously it's an incredibly powerful song. We know what the finished product sounds like. And, the whole, what do you call, the composite take that they put together, I actually think is a very good track that they've included in the box to kind of give listeners an idea of what it could have sounded like. And even that, they took the best bits of each one, and you can hear that it's half, okay, I have to keep it clean, it's half-hearted. It's half-hearted in the attempts that they took. And that, to me, was always one of the great lost opportunities there. If they had given that the attention that they gave, we'll take the real frequent flyers here, Don't Let Me Down, Get Back, Two of Us. There are hundreds, no exaggeration, hundreds of takes of each of those. Okay. And those songs came out sounding great. At the end, the finished product, no one could argue it. They're terrific records. But there was a lot more there to be had. And the whole bandy thing, it's interesting when you listen through more of those session tapes, you hear them talking about the basement tapes. That Dylan publishing, one of the first bootlegs that was out there, and you hear them actually start playing some of those songs. They knew right what was going on there up in Woodstock.
Yeah,
Very
and to show how conflicted George was at that time. In the Get Back book, on January 29th, so this is the day before the Rooftop show, George and John are talking, and George is talking about about how is the possibility of maybe making some solo records, and John's kind of saying the same thing, that I'd like to do that, but at that point they still were just very hesitant about doing that, because there was no precedent for any group to have for a rock group to basically take a sabbatical and for the members of the group make solo records and then come back together. That had never happened. I mean, obviously it did, with the Stones and Genesis and the Who and the Beach Boys, et cetera, but at that point it had never happened. And I think they both were very hesitant to, rock the boat too much.
Yeah, that's one of two levels, Al. You could make the argument that the Beatles invented the solo career.
Exactly.
Right? They did. I mean, whether the intent was, as you say, we'll all go make our records and then we'll come back as one big happy family, or if they said, we kind of like working apart, show's over, thanks. Each of them, and certainly the right out of the chute, the early 70s, they're all having hits, okay, and all making hit albums. What other band did that where they all had hits? Okay, they invented the solo career in rock and roll. Right.
I mean, that's what Ken has been saying for how many years now, that that they had the most successful solo careers of
amalgamated for sure.
Yeah, of any group. I think of that era or later.
Most people don't realize what an accomplishment that is. It's one thing for there to be a band and one member, usually the lead singer, has a successful solo career, but when every member does it on their own,
Yeah,
that's beyond extraordinary.
sure.
Lightning struck twice for the Beatles. So, but it's really interesting what you're talking about George Harrison, because as I've often said in my podcast, the whole Beatle breakup is so complicated. And sometimes I wonder what the other Beatles were thinking after John made the announcement that he wanted a divorce and all. And in 1970, there were a couple of interviews that George gave where he's talking about the Beatles like they're going to continue. And he's bringing up the idea that John proposed of there being that album with 4 John songs, 4 Paul songs,
Yeah.
4 George, a couple of Ringo songs. Not only that, but of all the Beatles, he was the most engaged at Apple, helping all the other artists.
No, with cultivating artists, it's him and Paul.
No question. Yeah.
We've focused on, we're trying to mix that up on Apple Jam. And we're like, how do we do a nice John spotlight? We got Elephant's Memory, we got Yoko, we got David Peel. What else you got?
That's it.
Bill Elliott, you got the one single.
Yeah.
George is very active, not just in producing, but playing with the other artists as well. And Paul, very much so as well. So that's real important. But, your point, Ken and Al, about, George with the advent of the solo careers, it kind of almost goes by innocuous. I had to flip back and go read it again. When George said, I've got all these songs. I feel like I should do a solo album of all those. And John, you can almost see him just dismissively saying, you should do that. Like, it sounds like it's encouraging if you just read the words. Yes, you should do that. That's a good idea. You have good songs. It was kind of, why don't you go do those on your own? That's how I read it. No, I mean that's how I read it. It's a good idea. You should do that. Not we should do that. You should do that.
So we don't have to bother with them.
That's almost like a necessary evil. It's one of those things where look, we're all the 3 of us and probably 99% of the people listening to this broadcast are gonna read a lot into all that dialogue. We just did it right here. Okay. Yeah. John might have very well been sincere in saying that'd be a great idea and people get to hear these songs. I read it completely differently.
So this leads me to the question, and this could be a show to itself. There's been so much talk about why did the Beatles not do George's songs from All Things Must Pass, not just the title track, but he also worked on Let It Down.
Hear Me, Lord.
Pity? Hear Me, Lord. Isn't it a pity?
Yeah.
Did John and Paul just think that George's material wasn't up to snuff? Or did they just want to dominate the band?
I think they may have settled into a group dynamic. And what does that mean? Let's just take the latter years. Sgt. Pepper. George has how many songs on that album? One. Okay. The White Album, it's a double. There are 4 sides. How many songs does he have? 4, 1 per side. Okay. He's still not a full member. I think the implied or just, inherently felt dynamic is John and I'll take care of 90% of this. You guys fill in the rest.
You're the junior partner.
Yeah, it's the junior partner thing, but it's hard to do that with a junior partner when one of the senior partners is detached, not just musically, but, mentally. He's dabbling in all, we're talking about John, he's dabbling in some serious drugs at the time. Yep. His focus is clearly on Yoko. We hear that, we see that. Hey, he'd give all of them up, for her. He'd give all that up for her. That's where he is at this point. And that's the part, that, particularly it's killed me the past week. People coming up to me, and I know they're good-hearted and they're only doing it to start a conversation. I heard on the radio today, oh my God, that it was John who left the Beatles first, not Paul. Like, did you know that? And we go through that and we say, yeah, he was completely removed from that. The part people miss, I mean, now if we all just take a step back, Al, you were talking before about how band members treat each other, whether they're teenagers or in their 20s or whatever.
Right.
They're on the brink of 30, okay? They're growing up, okay? And they realize they need something other than, not instead of, but they need something else, okay? And something else is, in John's case, you can't say, well, he felt he needed to finally get married. He had been married for 8 years or whatever it was to that point.
Right.
He needed another partner, another muse, another outlet, and he viewed her not just as his, life partner, but as an artistic partner. He was very much into what she was doing. Paul, the traditional 60s London bachelor, right? He finally needs to settle down, okay? And we see a lot of Linda. One of the stark things that caught me in that first Peter Jackson reel is when Linda and Yoko are sitting together and laughing like they're having like a little in-joke. I'm like, oh my God, that'll rewrite the story, right? At least a little bit. But yeah, John, you can see there's an incredible sequence in the Let It Be movie, which we've seen. Never mind how dark it is. Never mind George and Paul fighting about, whether you can play that descending lead guitar. Paul is talking about, we have to do the concert. And if we don't do the film, it's like saying there's no help, A Hard Day's Night. And John says nothing the whole time. He's looking at him. His body language is like he's stretching his arms,
right.
like he's bored, he's out of his mind, or he's going to strangle McCartney. Something's going to happen here. He is completely detached from that conversation. He's there, but he's not present. That's for sure.
But this is the problem that I find sometimes, is that if you look at what a Beatle said one day, especially John, he could say something completely different another day.
Oh, yeah.
Towards the end of January, he seemed really engaged in the whole idea of doing the Rooftop concert and finishing the music.
Yeah.
And yet after George left, he's talking about getting Eric Clapton, and he's actually saying, I don't know for sure if I want George back.
Yeah.
The same guy.
Same guy.
A few weeks apart. So how do you know what to take seriously if someone like John could change his opinion and his attitude?
Well, again, I'm not a clinician or anything, but obviously no secret, he was on quite a battery of drugs, and serious drugs at that time.
Right.
And one thing we know is that emotions and perceptions change by the minute. They're perpetually changing with the mood, pending on the reactions of the substances. Without getting too deep into all that, I think it answers the question of why at one minute it's like, yes, let's get up and go. Yes, let's do this. I'm pumped. This is it. And then the next day it's like, what else you got? So that is part of it. I don't think they'll make a big deal of that. I don't think they're going to focus on that in the movie. Nor do I think there's really a need to. But I think when you just, as you point out, Ken, you read one page in the book and, he's all gung-ho for something, and the next day he's, the silence doesn't necessarily indicate acceptance at that point.
Exactly.
But I still feel that Paul never wanted the Beatles to end. He's even said it recently. And with Ringo, he loved being in that group. And as he said many times, this was his family. These were his three brothers. He would have done anything for them. So those two, I think, would have wanted the Beatles to continue. It was really John and George, I think, that were going in different directions at that time. But still, George, like we said, there's all these different sides of George. He wanted to be so much a part of Apple. In fact, one of the new books that came out, the one from Ken Womack and Jason Krupa, All Things Must Pass, they're talking about George wanted to have a house band for Apple. To back up the Apple musicians. He was thinking of that.
Well, they kind of did, right? I mean, Klaus Vormann, is there for a lot of things. Billy, Keltner, Jim Horn, They're all over those, let's say, Doris Troy albums, the Billy Preston albums. I mean, the band things like Badfinger, that's obviously a whole separate kettle of fish.
Mm.
But yeah, the Apple Mafia is there, and they become the house band not just for Billy and Doris and people like that. They become the house band for John and Ringo and George.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But my point is George thought about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that like Motown did.
Yeah. Right. Or Stax or any of them. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah. I think Paul was very much invested in the continuation of the group. I think his behavior in the months after, while he was doing the solo album and the months afterward, kind of reflect that, because especially all the, by his own admission, the heavy drinking he was doing and all, it was kind of like it was, and this, by the way, this is before he made his, public move, but after John had said that he wanted a divorce, it was almost as if he was, as they say in the tribe, sitting Shiva.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was apparently very depressed, and because that had been his life for a decade at that point, and he. Mm-hmm.
Even though he had his difficulties with the band, and he found it difficult that Yoko was always there, but he also recognized the fact that this was John's new love, and he accepted that. He was compromising to that degree. He would go to lengths, to put up with everything.
Yeah,
the other band members.
I think when you talk about from a band perspective, though, Ken, they peak at certain times musically. And if you think of, let's say, 68 to 70, 71, seemingly every time Paul McCartney sat at a piano, I mean, look what came out of the piano in those 2-3 years. Let It Be, Hey Jude, Long and Winding Road, Maybe I'm Amazed. It's like that's a career's worth of monumental songs.
Right.
Okay? And that's on top of everything else.
Right. He's hitting he is, look, his career, like everyone, has peaks, valleys, it levels off for a little while. 68 to 70, 71, he can't miss. He sits at the piano and he can't miss. He can't help himself from writing not good songs, great songs, epic songs, the ones that will define him, right? They still define him. Hey Jude, Let It Be, Long and Winding Road, Maybe I'm Amazed, Go Into Ram, backseat of my car. He sits at the piano and that's what comes out. He simply can't miss at this point. For him to be on the bench waiting for a decision, are we going to do this as a Beatle record? Is it just me? Is it me and Ringo? What that had to be just, so confining for him. He had to be chomping at the bit to say, it's literally pouring out of him at this point.
Yeah.
Good point. And it was pouring out of George too.
I mean, I forgot a good one. Come and Get It, by the way. He had so many he could give them away. Yeah. I mean, it's a great song. It's a great pop song.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
It comes out of him, and he simply can't miss at this point.
Well, we can all argue when Paul McCartney has peaked as an artist, because I have strong opinions about his solo career.
That's a pretty good run right there.
Oh, I know. But you take a look, especially once you study Ram, how much stuff he was writing at that time, and some of it came out a few years later. I mean, it's incredible how prolific that man was at that moment. Anyway,
yeah,
it's terrible. It's a terrible analogy, but I call him he's a musical hemophiliac. Yeah. He just bleeds, almost uncontrollably bleeds melodies and great songs because he's still writing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly he's on a tear at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Yep.
the well has never run dry when it's come
No,
to that.
No.
So, and that's the biggest marvel of it all. He's still writing great stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's just talk briefly about the Get Back book, since we lightly touched upon it, and tell me, your thoughts about it. And other than the fact that the transcriptions I think are great, and I have to admit, I didn't read the book when it first came out originally.
Mm.
For me, and I've seen so many articles now where they're reprinting certain specific quotes because they're really important, I think. What have been, the highlights for you in looking at this book, and any revelations from the transcriptions? Anything at all?
Well, the one that I just mentioned from the 29th, I don't remember that being in any other book. Where, especially since there's a myth that's been going on around, over the years. Again, I think among people who, haven't seen the film in many years and don't really know the story, that there was so little communication between George and John during the sessions, and that's, certainly from the book, and even from the trailer and other things, there's plenty of communication between them. It doesn't, it may not have been the best communication, but there was certainly plenty of communication. It wasn't as if John was. I think the image that's cropped up is that John was sitting there especially through the Twickenham rehearsals, basically zonked out on heroin, and wasn't communicating with anybody other than Yoko, which is total nonsense.
Yeah.
But when I got the book last Wednesday, I was gonna just take a look through it. I ended up devouring it. I spent the entire afternoon reading it, and it was absolutely fascinating. And plus also the photos, the Ethan Russell's photos and Linda's photos are just wonderful. So it's and the book that's included with the audio package is a nice counterpoint to it.
Sure. Tom?
One of the things that I guess we would have known intuitively, but when it's printed there in black and white, it was really eye-opening to me. Much has been said going back 51 years and right up to the present in the interviews with the band, saying it's not conducive to make music while they've got cameras in your face and big spotlights and we're on this cavernous stage. Okay, after George leaves the band, what I found fascinating, literally fascinating, was the ensuing conversations are not limited to the three remaining Beatles. You've got Michael Lindsay Hogg basically saying, well, what about how we're going to finish the movie now? And is this as bad as it's ever been? I mean, if Michael Lindsay Hogg could join us in this conversation, my direct jackpot question to him would be, did the movie, were you planning on taking the movie in another direction, because George left the band? Some of these conversations he's having with John, is this as bad as it's gotten? Has he ever done this before? And the last thing the band would seemingly need at this point, given all the things that have led to George walking out, the, having to, be on the stage early mornings and everything else, and he leaves because he's fed up, and Michael Lindsay Hogg is not, his focal point is not the Beatles. It's still this movie. Yet he's got one foot in the not decision-making process, but almost in the repair process. And how do we do a search and rescue on this thing? It's incredible. One of the that was one of the things that really caught my eye. One of the others, which was just a fantastic visual. It's right at the start. There's the call sheet. They're in a movie studio. This is how they do it. They have the call sheet, and it says, crew shows up at 8:30. And I'm looking at that going, name me a rock band that's showing up 8:30 a.m., right?
Mhm.
The Beatles are used to doing, we've seen, you know, all the session logs from Abbey Road, and, you know, they would work through the night. They would be ending somewhere around 8:30. And then, you know, the artists show up at 10. And they actually make a great audio counterpart to it. They put it in there. It's actually the first thing on the, you know, on the outtakes discs. It's, you know, George saying, I see we're on the day shift now.
Yes.
I mean, it is, you can really come right out of the gate saying, this is not going to be your normal month of a rock band at work.
Right.
That was a pretty incredible visual, just seeing the call sheet. But I think that, you know, the interplay in people outside the band, you know, at some of these discussions, Paul, you know, when Paul is, you know, talking about having to get him back, and Peter Jackson says, well, if you think it reads well, wait till you see it in the movie. And you see Paul literally welling up, like about to cry, talking about why they need to get George back. That's the part. I can't wait to see the last piece of the puzzle. So even something as simple as what we were talking about before, Ken, the pomegranate and the cauliflower, you know, writing with something. It's a story we've read before. We now see a transcription of. We now have the audio of that, you know, in the box set. And I don't know that it's going to be in the film, but my guess is it may well be in there. I think, you know, it's kind of like when you're reading the lyrics to the song, and, you know, you're listening to the album, you're really experiencing it in a couple of different dimensions. That's really what the book has done for me.
Yeah, I noticed that they have the I don't know why I'm moaning bit in the book, which is nice. You know, sometimes some of the things that I found the most interesting is something that would go right by you. And I noticed that on January 16th, only Paul showed up.
Yeah, well, George is gone, right?
Right.
He's not back yet.
He's rehearsing "Oh Darling" at the piano and leaves. And that's the whole day. That kind of tells you what the others are thinking, and you know, how invested they are in this, or what they don't really know where they're going.
Well, remember, they're in that cooling period between George walking out on the 10th and them getting back to Apple, was it the 21st? You know, so they're in that cooling period, you know, between when they're going to talk to George and come to some terms about, you know, him coming back. So maybe, you know, who knows, maybe we'll get more insight with the movie. But at that point, are the sessions even unofficially suspended? You know, in other words, do we keep doing this without everybody in it? It will, you know, it will stick out like a sore thumb if we're filming this, as, you know, remember, we didn't really know the whole, you know, see you around the club story until that tape showed up, you know, in the relative recent past. We didn't know that 51 years ago, certainly when the movie came out. It sure would have stuck out like a sore thumb. But, you know, that's some of the great stuff in that book. I think the book is going to be a great piece of glue in between the audio box that we've gotten and the video element that just can't wait to see in another month.
Right.
And I'm hoping that the format of the book will be something at least very similar to what will be in the three episodes.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, at least from an outline point of view, it should be. They'll both be chronological, right? So,
exactly.
So, you know, I think you're off to the races in that department, right? That it's Twickenham first, Apple second, Roof, and the final shoot on the 31st to close it out. So I think you'll get that, but obviously with moving images and not stills. So I think that'll be that's a pretty safe bet right there.
Okay.
Although the third one though could be a shorter episode because
supposed to be 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean
right.
But you got to figure if each of them are 2 hours, the Roof we're going to see complete, right? So that's 40,
right, which is 42 minutes, whatever it is. And then
the next day,
another.
You know, they work on 3 songs, right? It's Two of Us, Let It Be, Long and Winding Road, but they do multiple takes. So depending how many they show you, there you go. And I'm sure it's not
Mm.
going to open up with them on the roof going 1, 2, 3, 4 and going in. I'm
Yeah.
sure they'll show, what's going on down in the lobby and maybe in the basement in the control room and, at the reception desk and out in the street or wherever. I mean, they've got to frame it. It's going to tell a story for sure.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think that 2 hours will fly by pretty quick.
Yeah.
I hope the rooftop concert is strictly the concert and not interspersing with people on the street like in Let It Be.
I think what I read is it's going to be split screen. That you will have a continuous feed of the concert with an alternate view of people in the street and things. That's what I read in one place.
Okay.
Maybe that's a DVD. Well, I guess it's not a DVD option. We're watching a stream. You don't control it. But I've read that it will be, or at least some of it will be split screen, that you'll still get to see the whole thing. So there you go.
Anyway, you were referring to a quote that George Harrison said, Al, which I will read here, which is in the book from Get Back. Really, I don't want to do any of my songs on the show because I know they'll just turn out shitty because they come out like a compromise. Whereas in a studio, then we can work on them and get it how you want them. So that could also explain why there are no George Harrison songs in the concert. Doesn't explain why there are no, well, you had For You Blue and eventually I Meet Mine, but the All Things Must Pass material, not making it for Let It Be.
Yeah.
And in fact, let's see, on the Glyn Johns acetate, there is only the one just For You Blue, which is, I think we can safely say, is not a major Harris song.
Yeah, but again, let's just take a quick time out, Ken. We're talking before about the band dynamic and what the assumed, complement of songs would be on an album. Let's look at Glyn Johns' version. Okay, before Phil Spector, before they had to add I Mean Mine for the movie, before any of that.
Right.
You've got the Glyn Johns album, 14 tracks, one George. Okay, it's still kind of that implied dynamic or forced dynamic in the band. I mean, they've put in parts of Save the Last Dance for Me ahead of a different George song.
Right.
It is that sandbox that they're in at that point.
It's mind-boggling to me. I mean, if you don't notice how George is flourishing as an artist gradually, take a look at While My Guitar Gently Weeps or anything before that, even Taxman or If I Needed Someone, how can you just, ignore him most of the time? It is like a compromise for John and Paul to let him have a song or two.
Yeah. Well, all the talking about All Things Must Pass, the story that now Eric Clapton's credibility has kind of taken some hits, especially recently. But in the theatrical version of the Concert for George, he talks about Paul turning up for the rehearsals for the Concert for George, and I guess Clapton pretty much assigned him to do All Things Must Pass. And according to Clapton, Paul seemed to be almost totally unfamiliar with the song.
It's one of those things, and yet Paul has done that song in concert in outside of the Concert for George. He's played that at a couple other things. But the one that struck me as really good of Paul doing a George song at the Concert for George, I mean, he nailed For You Blue.
Yes.
Nailed it.
Yes.
Okay? But go watch that film again and watch. And I mean, the more you know of the story, the more you're like, oh no. It's almost like watching small animals get tortured when the whole band is doing this rousing version of Wah Wah. It's a song written about Paul giving George a headache. And there's Paul sitting there like on the piano, just like kind of minding his own business. But it's just one of those moments. I'll tell you what's really cool, as long as we're in Concert for George land, is when they're doing My Sweet Lord. He's right in it, right in the thick of it. right in it. But yeah, that version of Wah Wah, I always thought was a little bit weird having Paul on the stage for that one.
Yeah.
Just a little weird.
Is that song strictly about Paul, or couldn't you
Well,
also
it's
interpret it as being about John and Paul?
Well, he says, it was about him, Paul giving him a headache. He give me a Wah Wah.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
There
Got to
you
read I
go.
Me Mine again, because I could have sworn he made it sound like it was,
yeah,
what was going on at Apple.
yeah.
All the headaches and the meetings giving him a headache. So
And didn't he write Wah Wah the night that he quit?
Yeah, well, that's
Yep.
quite a night, right? I mean, and they have the diary page in there, which has been in I Me Mine. Woke up,
Mhm.
had breakfast, rehearsed with the band, quit the Beatles, went home, went to to Klaus and Christine's. But what else did he do? He worked on a song that night. Trivia moment for everyone.
Hmm.
He goes over to Trident and works on The King of Pho with Brute Force. That's the night they did the orchestral work for that. I mean, there's a day, we had Brute on the show and we said, okay, so George makes a career decision. The definition of a career decision, he leaves the Beatles
Mhm.
and goes and works on The King of Pho. That's a day for you. Okay? That's a day out. It's just that's how crazy this whole thing must have been for them. Remember, we got the benefit of 51 years of hindsight to try and digest this. Okay? I mean, is George driving over to Trident saying, yeah, I know today we could have worked on Get Back and Don't Let Me Down and Across the Universe. I'm going to go do that Brute Force record. I mean, to him, to your point about working with the Apple artist, now that's a
Right.
record that both John and George fought real long and real hard to get on the label and get distributed. This is a record they got behind. That's the story there. And he wasn't going to let that, whatever happened at Twickenham that day or whatever wah-wah he had, he wasn't going to let that derail what he was otherwise focused on for Apple.
Right. And the funny thing is about that record is that all the orchestra members did their track without ever hearing the words.
Yeah. Didn't have to. I guess it was John Barham, right?
Yeah,
Did the,
right.
the
Mhm.
orchestration. And you put a chart in front of these guys and they're off to the races, Go ahead,
If they heard the lyrics, they may not have been able to play it with a straight face, but
Yeah.
Another thing, I mean, a lot of people know about this, but it's still a very ironic thing for Paul to say, which is in the Get Back book. He said here, it's almost in a way we should do a show in a place where we're not allowed to do it. Like we should trespass, go in, set up, and then get moved, and that should be the show. Getting forcibly ejected, still trying to play your numbers, and the police lifting you.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
foretelling what's about to happen. It's almost like it's planned, you'd think.
Well, Ringo said, much the same thing. I wish cops had lifted me off the kit, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to play.
Right.
But the reality, obviously you guys have seen the movie, Mal is getting an earful from the cops, and the amp goes off, and you can actually hear that on the Anthology 3 with that final version of Get Back. And just before the solo, you can hear the guitar come back on. It's that scene where George reaches around the back and, pops the power back on. It was, go arrest them, right? What are they going to arrest them for? Apparently, the cops, that's another thing I found out through reading all this stuff, especially recently. The cops, it wasn't so much about the noise, as it turns out. It was about the impeding of the traffic with the crowds down below. How about
that? That's right. Yeah.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
So that too, figures into the story. How about that?
Yeah. Also, because I've talked a lot about the Apple Rooftop, the fact that they only did 5 songs and they repeated a few of them.
Oh yeah.
A couple times. Did they really have anything else in the bag that they could do? And you read, I think the day before, Ringo saying we got 6 songs, I think it is 6 songs. I think John says the same thing. And Paul reads out a list of like 12 or 13 songs that they could do. So I'm
But
wondering.
how many of them are his?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, they had by then, certainly two of us could have been performed. They're up there with electric guitars and a piano. Is that stylistically going to fit? Probably not.
No.
Let It Be Long and Winding Road. Clearly, they're not going to get a grand piano
No.
up there.
George
and,
Martin said no.
Yeah,
for
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, they had other songs, and of course, we know from all the rehearsal tapes and the stuff we've seen in Let It Be, no secret, they could have run through Shake, Rattle, and Roll and Rip It Up or something like that. They could have done Dig It, that's for sure. That would work up there,
Sure.
right? But yeah,
But
they
George had pulled all of his.
Right. So the George tracks are off. So yeah, they do 5 titles up there, 11 songs. One of them, it's 10 or a big asterisk after the 10. They say, oh yeah, they Get Back 3 times. Actually, there are 4 recordings of Get Back up there. The first one, I think they chalk up to just a volume and sound check kind of thing before saying let's do this. But yeah, one of the many Rooftop recordings out there runs 46 minutes, and of course we hear the full 42-minute concert up there. The other thing is it's that one, for lack of a better term, rehearsal take / sound check of Get Back.
Okay.
But it doesn't expand the number of songs. And of course, I loved for years on the bootlegs it says includes I Want You, She's So Heavy. Yeah, John plays and that's it. He does that like in between songs. Or God Save the Queen. You hear dun, 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 and that's it. Okay. They didn't play God Save the Queen. They did not play Danny Boy. They did not play I Want You, She's So Heavy. Those were little, off the cuff riffs is all it was. But
Sure.
And everyone knows the 5 songs that they ultimately show up in the movie. It's Get Back, Don't Let Me Down, Got a Feeling, Dig a Pony, and One After 909. Which kind of leads me, Ken, to ask you this. Now, you've been asking us questions. I want to throw this one past you. In terms of the repertoire and the set list that ultimately gets in the box, okay? One of the things that, and again, if you had 100 different guests on this show who know all the bootlegs, you'd get 100 different potential set lists. One of the things that I found less than exciting was the outtakes and alternates were very close to the finished version. So yeah, there's a version of Get Back Take 8 on there, or One After 909 that Take 3 from the 23rd or something. They're not radically different than what you get on the album. Now, there's a couple of ways to make that a little more spicy. We could have taken, again, these just examples, 2 of Us, which we know as an acoustic number, and maybe hear the electric version. I was actually volleying this with my esteemed co-host and running buddy from the fest there, Al Sussman, earlier today, talking about the differences. Let's say go back to the White Album box. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, you hear the demo and you hear the end version and you say, wow, that's a journey. Okay. Electric 2 of Us, acoustic 2 of Us, people I think would notice. And that's to say nothing of there were really no alternate, call them titles, okay? Let's not call them tracks or songs, titles. Susie's Parlor, Madman, Watching Rainbows, all the ones that we've known from bootlegs. What was your take on that, Ken, in terms of the selections that were picked as the bonus material? Not counting the Glyn Johns album and the Giles remix. Talking about the 2, albums of jams and rehearsals and Apple sessions.
Well, I kind of agree in part with what you were just saying, but I don't mind hearing alternate versions of Beatles songs that are slightly different, where you notice something that's different. In fact, it's funny. My favorite of all those outtakes is that take of One After 909, because you hear more of Billy Preston. He's playing the piano instead of the electric piano. It's a little bit looser. I really think the band is cooking on that. So anytime you hear a slightly different arrangement, that's what I go for. And that's one of the few criticisms that I would make about this box set. Anytime, and I've mentioned this, I think, on things we said today. Anytime, yeah, like in Two of Us, you know that what they're playing on acoustic guitar changes instead of da 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 da.
Oh yeah, he does the different meter there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that alone I find fascinating. To hear Two of Us faster is fascinating. I know that there were takes of Don't Let Me Down where in the bridge, when John is singing I'm in Love for the first time, there are moments when Paul is answering back a line. So he's coming back with something that they didn't end up using in the finished version, but I find that part interesting. There's also a take of Don't Let Me Down where George is playing a guitar solo at the end, and it's a lot like Devil in Her Heart. And they start rehearsing Devil in Her Heart. That I find interesting. Anything that's different like that. There's a moment in the version of Let It Be, which one was it? Where you've got descending piano chords going down.
Yeah,
So
they call it the F bit. The dun 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 dun, dun the descending thing where they open it. Yeah, I like that, and even there's one that's so close to the finished take, except that in the middle, before the guitar solo, they do the Let It Be, Let It Be, Let It Be. They do the bridge twice instead of once. It's like at some point, George Martin or somebody says, "Yeah, get that out of there." It's that's always fascinated me when I've heard a real close version and a real good version of a Beatles song. And I say, I met George Martin once for a handshake. That was about it. I never got to sit and chat with him. The question I would ask him is, how do you know when you say that, as good as that is, you got one better? That's a gift. It's clearly a gift. To hear that, not even just saying, no, we don't think Guitar Gently Weeps should be acoustic. It should be a heavier number. Okay, I can think that broadly. Okay, sure. But when it's that close and you say one more,
when is it soup?
That's a gift. That is absolutely a gift. And speaking of Let It Be, one of the things I was talking about about this with my brother Jim just earlier today. He was marveling at the box the way I am. And the version, there's a take of Let It Be in there from like the 26th or 27th. All right, so it's not the final one. And as late as the 26th, he doesn't have the last verse written. Okay, this thing dates back to the White. I mean, they come out of the guitar solo in the bridge, Let It Be, and he does the I Find Myself in Times of Trouble again. And for years, just listening to that as a, quote, rehearsal or as an outtake, I said, oh, he's just singing the first verse again. Big deal. No, it hadn't been written yet. We find that out. And that last verse, to me, is one of the great vocal and lyric matches of Paul's entire recorded output. Hearing him sing the verse with When the Night is Cloudy, and Shine Until Tomorrow, Let It Be. I mean, it's a brilliant lyric, and he sings it absolutely perfectly. I mean, the emotion in his voice suits it just so well. I said, and that's the last minute change. I mean, it's like, at some point the instincts, I mean, this is what separates them from, virtually from everyone else.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that happen with the Beatles in the studio that could have been accidents that they kept in, and it's fine.
No, he knows at this point now. I gotta write one more verse. Going back to the Find Myself in Times of Trouble. By the way, if they polish that up, it works. That would have been just a great song, just like that.
Yeah,
right.
But that last verse, it's literally a ninth inning, change that he makes, and it's just one of the absolute highlights to me of the from the official canon, from the Please Please Me to Let It Be canon. It's one of his absolute best vocals. It's one of his absolute best lyrics, and as I said, that 2 or 3 year period, he sits at the piano, and the magic just happens. And speaking of him sitting at the piano with versions of Let It Be, got a great chuckle out of that version when he plays a little of Please Please Me at the time.
Yes.
I mean,
That was nice.
it's just so
Yeah.
funny because we've heard for years, oh man, did they play a bunch of oldies throughout January? Yeah, we know they ran through Chuck Berry and Carl Perkins and Everly Brothers and Little Richard and all that. Yeah, they also did some old Lennon and McCartney stuff.
Yeah.
It's kinda
Well,
cool.
plus the approach that he took to those lyrics, those couple of lyrics, is very similar to I guess the original concept of
Yeah, it's
Please
slower,
Please
right.
Me as a
Right.
slow Roy Orbison type of song
right.
until George Martin
Yeah.
said, maybe you should speed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. And what do
Yeah.
you ultimately walk out with? It wouldn't have been known at the time he did it because it's still January 69, but
Right.
here we are later with the benefit of the rear view mirror. What do you get there? The title tracks from their first and last released albums. Please Please Me.
Yeah.
Let It Be.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very
true.
He couldn't have been thinking that then. This wasn't planned to be their last album.
Right.
Right. I mean, you still have Abbey Road coming, so there you go.
But also highlights for me. The Long and Winding Road is one of my favorite songs. Period. From any artist. It's probably in my top 3 of McCartney songs of all time.
He wrote that at the piano, didn't he? Oh yeah. Go on.
Yeah.
But
Very possibly.
I grew up on the Phil Spector produced version, which
Yeah.
I love and I always defend. But it has a different feel altogether when you remove that production and it's just the band. So that's a
Mhm.
highlight for me to itself.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that when that one came out on Anthology back in the
Right.
90s, it's the same track,
Yep.
absent
Right.
the overdubs. That's kind of my go-to version of that song. Even more than people go, is that the naked one? No, the naked one was a different take.
Mhm.
This was just one that that I didn't see any. To me, it sounded perfect the way it was.
Yeah. Well, it's just a song that I've always said that, a great song is a great song no matter what you do with it. But I think what Phil Spector brought to it made it the hit that it was, because by itself, just the band alone, as much as I love it and devour it, it would never have been the hit record that it
Well,
was by
And
itself. That's just my opinion,
and-
but
and I've mentioned this before. I mentioned it in the piece I did on the Beatles Afterlife, was that I think a lot of people, I think possibly why it was such a success as a single here in the US, was that I think a lot of people kind of took it as almost like a punctuation mark,
Yeah.
a period to their story, because obviously this is after the quote unquote announcement that Paul was leaving, and but with no idea that there would be this tremendous afterlife. It really appeared that was the end of the Beatles story.
yeah,
Mhm.
So
no,
I think-
it's a great
yeah.
point. Yeah.
And I think the especially Giles' remix of it is,
Yeah, just
as
tones
Tom
it
would say,
down,
sounds like $1 million.
yeah. Well, let me ask this of you guys, since we're talking about Phil Spector and his work. No less an authority on the Beatles than John Lennon himself in 1980 was talking about the song Across the Universe. And he loved that song, was very proud of it. But in his own words, he says, I don't think we ever really got it right. So, you've got the is it Little Red Riding Hood or Goldilocks and the Three Bears? One's too fast, one's too slow, one's at a low. Which I'm mixing up my stories here. I guess that's Three Bears, right? So you've got call it the Let It Be version. It's slowed down to the point for you musicians that it goes down a semitone, and then is covered up or just lathered in choirs and strings and things, right? You've got the one that they put out on the charity album, the World Wildlife album, which is sped up a semitone.
Right.
So now they're a full tone apart, and it has the female voices on it.
And bird sound effects.
Right, and the bird effects, right. So you've got two very different takes at two very, well, it's the same take, but two different speeds, two different sets of overdubs. And there was a song, you know, to your point on Long and Winding Road, Ken, where why did they do anything? It was perfect the way it was. We've heard, since those two original releases, we've heard several now other, you know, official releases that have shown just how much better that song could have been. Well, not could have been, but how good it was, right? There's the one, if you care to dig deep enough, right? It's the last track on the last disc of that six-disc monstrous white album.
Right.
It is stunning, okay, in its raw beauty. The version on Anthology, they called it the Indian version with the tambura. Great. The one on Mono Masters, just cleaned up and at the right speed. Perfect. And now on this disc that raised a lot of eyebrows, I know it raised two right here in Scotch Plains, CD5, this Let It Be EP with 4 songs, and it's like, 4 songs? Really? What is this for? And it's got its purpose. It's to highlight a couple new mixes. One of those mixes is Across the Universe, the unreleased Glyn Johns version, which is absolutely fantastic.
To me, that's the definitive one.
It's the rare case, right? The Beatles, you know, the official catalog is 212 songs. It is the rare case, certainly less than you can count on one hand, in my book anyway, where I say there's the alternate. I prefer the alternate to the final one. I love all the alternates because they're interesting and they're fun, and you get to hear them working on it and how it took shape. But if I was George Martin, because I got that kind of set of ears, right? Where I think the outtake or the alternate served the song better. Absolutely the case here with Across the Universe, in my opinion. What say you?
Well, I mean, I see your point of view, and the only version that I hate to say dislike is the version that's on the World Wildlife version, because it is sped up.
Right.
But I like all the other ones. I love what Phil Spector did to it. But when I first heard it stripped down, you know, it is stunning to itself, and it's such a beautiful song that way. And really and truly, the version that's on Let It Be Naked and the one that's on the Beatles Anthology and the one that's on the White Album are all very close, you know.
Well, a lot of them are built on the same basic take, right? I mean, the demo is different for sure, but you know, but
well, the one on the World Wildlife Fund and the one that's on the original Let It Be album is the same take.
That's right.
And the one on Let It Be Naked, I'm pretty sure, is the same take.
Yeah.
But the one on the Anthology is a different take, and the one on the White Album outtakes is a different take from that.
It's take 6, not take 8. And the one on Mono Masters, which is the Mono Master one, is kind of close to the Glyn Johns one. Kind of close to the one we got here. A little bit different, but
the right speed.
Yeah, it's the right, and you know what? Maybe it's just innate, or maybe it's, you know me, I'm a legend in my own room when it comes to playing the guitar. You know, I can hear that it's not at the right speed, you know, and then once you hear it at the right speed, you know, in the normal tuning and the normal tempo, the slowed down one and the sped up one stick out like sore thumbs. They just do. And I think it's one of the reasons why, again, perhaps innately, go back to before we had this grand 5-disc box. Just think about the Let It Be album, right? A lot of people, you know, said it's not really a great Beatle album, and gee, you know, it's too quirky. It's this, you know, it sounds like a bit of a patchwork because you get the raw rock and roll, then you get these gloriously slick produced tracks like Long and Winding Road and
Let It Be
and Across the
Universe.
Yeah.
And then you get this little off the cuff thing, Maggie May and Dig It, you know, you say, did they just need to fill time? Because that's clearly not a serious attempt at a song. It is what it is. It's them having a little bit of fun and jamming and being loose.
Right.
And it didn't have obviously the cohesion that Abbey Road, which as far as everyone knew then, they knew that before they knew the Let It Be album, of course,
Sure.
right? And certainly the ones before it, like Pepper, they had a little bit more cohesion in the sound. It owes to having a producer, not three guys with their hands in the kitty, or four, right? You had George Martin, Glyn Johns, Phil Spector, all with their hands in the kitty. The album sounded disjointed, but at the end of the day, there are 3 number 1 songs in there. Yes, they're different mixes, and I know that the Let It Be version has the guitar solo, we know, but there are 3 songs in there that occupied the number 1 chart in Billboard at some point.
Right.
So it's not. I mean, I've always loved Let It Be. I always have. I loved it because maybe not because it was quirky, but despite it was quirky.
But in that respect, you could say that actually the more cohesive version is the Glyn Johns version,
Absolutely.
which they turned down 4 times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
because it's not as it doesn't sound as patchwork as
right. No, right. When that owes to having one producer, not just turning the knobs at the board, but selecting the takes and saying, does this fit thematically? Does it not sound like a different band in total? Is it a different band in total with a choir and a horn section or whatever?
Sure.
Well, this is where I kind of disagree here, because the Glyn Johns mix has never really done much for me. It doesn't seem to have the presence that the Phil Spector produced. I know there's only 4 songs really that he worked on, Phil Spector, but I always prefer the original Let It Be album to what Glyn Johns did. But I wanted to ask the two of you, if you look at the original Let It Be album as being a success, yes, commercially, as we said, 3 number 1 singles, number 1 album, but the fact that it didn't come out the way the Beatles originally wanted it to, it wasn't as nature intended, without overdubs and all that. They still had to bring in Phil Spector to work on The Long and Winding Road and Let It Be, I Me Mine, Across the Universe. So do you look at, when it came to its fruition, do you think that it was a successful effort, or is it more of a disappointment because it wasn't exactly what the Beatles wanted from the beginning?
Well, the Beatles, they turned down, as I was just saying, they turned down the Glyn Johns concept 4 times. So they really, to be honest, they really have only themselves to blame for the fact that the Let It Be album was not as consistent.
Well, Giles made that point in one of the recent interviews. He says Glyn Johns gave them exactly what they asked for, and then they decided they didn't want it.
Exactly.
Right? He gave them exactly what they asked for. And in fact, by the time they go back to him, right? Remember, the Glyn Johns, compilation goes through 4 stages. There's the one at the end of January, which is very rough, not even designed to be an album. It's a blueprint for him to say, do you want to do a set of the oldies and a couple of the new ones? And here they are. And they said, forget that. This totally is not what we had in mind. Great. The sessions disband, the spring comes, the singles come out, and they say, go back in and try again. He comes back with it 99% of the way there, the version that he delivers in early May. I mean, the tweaks are so minor that the next version is at the end of May. It's literally just tightening up some of the between song chatter and a couple of different bits of dialogue and what have you. And then that is now the Get Back album. Okay. And the Get Back album, as we were talking about before, right? Beatles Monthly Book had the thing for the concerts, it had the little coupon to send in and get your tickets. Beatles Monthly Book also reported this was coming out. Okay, track by track. Mal Evans did the track by track analysis, talked about, and then John plays a little of Save the Last Dance for Me. And I mean, he colors it in note for note. This is This is the Get Back album.
Hmm.
Then they sidetrack, they do Abbey Road, all the attention is put into that, and as we know, come the beginning of 1970, they dust it all off, and Phil Spector comes in, and they have to polish up and lay down a track for I Me Mine and all of that. And that's when you get what people have considered version 4 of Glenn's album. It's what he produced in the spring of 69, plus these tracks, which are now on the EP, right? The Across the Universe and I Me Mine mixes. So, look, people have collected them and bootlegged them and compiled them for years, and no one knows if that's what the final compilation would be, but it would stand to reason that that's what it would be. It's the Get Back album, and they said, go add 2 songs to it. So there's that version, and that kind of, it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong, but when you put the Glyn Johns version into this box, would they, could they, should they have just put his 2 extra mixes on the end of that first disc? Would they look like bonus tracks? Maybe. Possibly they were never sequenced into a new Get Back album. He did the mixes, but we have no knowledge that that was going to be the next album. He did those mixes, but it didn't say, okay, put in Across the Universe after whatever Teddy Boy, and put in I Me Mine after Let It Be or something. So they may have been perceived as bonus cuts at that point. But that's the 4 iterations of the Glyn Johns record.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, I think, I probably should spend a lot more time listening to the Glyn Johns mix to appreciate it more, but I'm glad that it's there for historical reasons.
Yeah.
But
I to be honest, just from a sort of a sentimental standpoint, I was really happy to be able to listen to it, because that's the material from those first bootlegs that I got there in the early weeks of 1970.
You get used to hearing it that way too.
Yeah.
So
sure.
And for all the flack, not just from fans, but from the Beatles themselves, of course, over the years, and even George Martin and Glyn Johns, overproduced by Phil Spector, right?
Right.
The album version, and I'll use this because it's likely in my top 5 Beatles favorite songs of all time. The album version, specifically, of Let It Be, I think is just it's an epic recording
killer.
and an epic production. I prefer it light years over the single. And there are people who say, our good friend Bruce Spicer, what did they do? They added this loud guitar. It's one of George's very best guitar solos. Without question, it's one of his very best. It's like a little song within a song. That's how good that solo is. And it stands as, again, if I were guessing, in my top 5 favorite Beatle recordings of all time. Phil Spector, horns, loud guitar, and everything. Just like with you, Ken, with Long and Winding Road, with the choir and the harp and the strings and everything else. Okay, with that is my preferred version of that song.
Yeah,
more than Glyn, more than any of the others.
Yeah, the guitar solo from George is so much more biting on the album version.
It's like I say, it's a song within a song,
right.
Just the way it's built around. It starts at the root, it ends at the root. The phrasing is perfect. It is a perfect guitar solo.
Okay. Well, let's run through. I know that we mentioned some of them. Are there any specific outtakes that are favorites of yours? We've mentioned a few, and
that
I will
are in
say
the set,
that
or that are
in the box set, in the Let It Be box set of the 2 discs. I know that. Let me just mention a few for me, because, like I said, One After 909 is killer, and ironically, the tracks that leaked out. Shouldn't say leaked out. What Universal, allowed to have on the internet.
Right. The teasers.
They seem to be the ones that I like the most, because there is that different take of For You Blue, which is so much more lively and spirited. I hate to say that I even like it better than the released version. There's more piano. George's vocals are so clear. Like you said, Tom, that version of Let It Be where Paul starts off with Please Please Me. I like that version of Get Back where you can hear that's where they edited, where the coda from the single version. So it's cool to have that full version in with the part that wasn't used.
Yep.
So yeah, the version of The Long and Winding Road, which is from the movie, right? Let It
Yes.
Be? Yeah, and it's absolutely stunning. I like that rehearsal of I Me Mine, where you just hear the backing tracks. That's really cool. It's really nice to have a few songs represented from what came out in the solo careers of the Beatles. It was nice to have Give Me Some Truth in there. Not a great version of it, but just to know that they were rehearsing it. And All Things Must Pass. Yeah, and of course there's Teddy Boy on the Glyn Johns, but you know, I'm not crazy about that version. The one on the first McCartney album is so much better. But yeah, those are some of my favorites. Oh, Darling. There's a rehearsal of that where Paul is in such command of his voice. It's incredible.
Now that's the same take we got on the anthology, but it runs like a minute or a minute and a half longer. I mean, you get to hear a whole lot more harmony in there, which is good.
Yeah. I like that version of Get Back where Paul does more ad-libbing at the end. It's 5 o'clock, your mother's got your tea on, take your cap off. I love that stuff. Okay, so those are some of my favorites. How about you, Al?
You know, you mentioned the Long and Winding Road, and that's wonderful. It's so good. Yeah, I would say probably if there's like to pick one, I would say that would be it.
Nice.
Okay. Any others? Because it's 2 discs there.
Right. And others are not actually coming to mind, although I think you've mentioned most of the highlights, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay. Tom, how about you?
Yeah.
Well, I actually got to do for the Way Beyond Compare, the Rarities show. We did tons of programming around the box. I got to pick, prior to it, you know, actually hitting the stores, and we had it ready to go on release day, I picked 7, which is a typical show. It's a half hour long. The 7 I picked were that the Welcoming, you know, we're on the day shift, All Things Must Pass composite. The little bit that I enjoyed of George helping Ringo write Octopus's Garden at the piano reminded me of the movie. It's a different clip than is in the movie, but it's still kind of cool. The rehearsal of Something with the pomegranates once again. I picked, and this is normally not my MO. I picked 2 that were merely different mixes, not outtakes. Certainly that Across the Universe, Glyn Johns version, that was a must for me. And I also used the Don't Let Me Down mix. The harmony, bringing Paul's voice up next to John's, particularly in the beginning, just sounds incredible. The Please Please Me, Let It Be, sit down at the piano. And the last one I picked, and it's one we haven't really talked about, was Without a Song with Billy Preston being joined by John and Ringo. You know,
That's a surprise.
Yeah, well, you know, and again, we've all known for 51 years, right? Look at your Get Back single. What does it say? The Beatles with Billy Preston. This kind of flips it around. It's Billy Preston with the Beatles. And it's an old song, dates back to the Depression, probably.
20s.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but hearing him do that, because it's a song that he ultimately did on one of his solo albums. He did it on I Wrote a Simple Song after he left Apple. So it's obviously a song that meant a lot to him. And, you know, we hear, you know, that Let It Be and Long and Winding Road, that he added that spiritual and soulful, you know, tone to those songs. Here you can see him just pouring. It's just pouring out of him, that bluesy soul feeling. And he's got John and Ringo baited right into it. So that was another highlight for me.
Yeah. Also, during those sessions, there were a few times when Billy did some of his songs that ended up on his Apple albums.
Oh yeah,
during the Get Back sessions.
Oh yeah, he put All Things Must Pass out.
I know.
On encouraging words. By the way,
That's right.
when we say Billy Preston now, it is Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Billy.
That's
Preston.
right. Yeah.
officially this week. And just in case, maybe for your listeners, Ken, that may not know this, to
Okay.
celebrate Billy going in the Hall of Fame, Apple and Universal are putting out a deluxe vinyl edition of the Encouraging Words album.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, look at that. The things you learn by listening to the Ken Michaels show here.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're putting out Encouraging Words, and that one for you, Beatle and Apple aficionados out there, that one's got, it's certainly George is producing, but you get All Things Must Pass and My Sweet Lord before they appear on All Things Must Pass. I mean,
that's true.
That's some great stuff right there. So you can check that out too.
And also, since you mentioned the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Paul is going to be there.
Oh yeah,
as a presenter, and actually for the Foo Fighters.
Yep. And he's done the presenting duties before, right? I think 3 times before, right?
For John, for Ringo, and James Taylor.
Ding, 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 ding.
Right.
Kenny gets them all. Look at that.
Yep.
Very nice. Yeah, so he'll likely get up there, and I got to believe he'll get up there and jam with them or jam with whatever ensemble thing they do at the end. But, typically the presenter, if they're that tied into the band, goes up and plays when the band does their, whatever song they are going to do. Don't know what the Foos would pull out. I mean, there's so much to pick from, but be cool to see him up there playing with them.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the, if I'm not mistaken, that will be the first time that he's been on stage since the end of his last tour in 2019.
Well, he was on stage last night, but didn't perform. There was this thing for the Robin Hood Foundation in New York.
Right, because of the anniversary,
Yeah, it was the precise 20th anniversary of the Concert for New York. But he got some sort of lifetime humanitarian, award. Didn't perform. There were other performers. Springsteen did a short set. The Jonas Brothers were there. A couple of other acts. He
Alicia
did not.
Keys.
Yeah, he did not perform, either on his own or with anyone else. But yeah, I mean, so if he performs next week, Al, it would be the first time he's performed on stage since the last tour, and certainly since the world blew up a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and that last show, if I'm remembering correctly, the last show of that tour was the one in LA at Dodger Stadium with Ringo. Yeah.
Now he did one of those COVID telethon Zoom things. I remember he did Lady Madonna.
Right, but I mean,
you mean for a paying crowd? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
When did he do the virtual show where he played the trumpet for when the Saints?
That was the Preservation Hall Jazz Band.
Yeah.
Yes.
When he played the Saints Go Marching In. And the other one, I forget what the name of it was. It was one of the COVID, frontline worker benefits where he did that really soulful electric piano version of it.
Right.
That was really, really good.
Yeah.
So, but it'd be great to see him up there with the Foos. Who knows? Maybe they do that Cut Me Some Slack song, which technically wasn't the Foo Fighters, but who knows? Could be doing anything.
When I first heard that Paul's going to be there as a presenter, I first thought, could it be for Billy Preston? And
that would be
perfect timing with Get Back coming out.
That would be perfect.
I know. So I hope that they honor Billy with musicians jamming to his music, and see Paul do one of his songs or just playing on one of his songs.
That would be real nice.
It could be great. Yeah.
That would be something.
Definitely.
That would be something.
Indeed. Let me just add one thing. You were asking about favorites, and I really should point out the Across the Universe mix. Glenn Johns mix that we were talking about before, particularly because in kind of a cosmic, ironic way, because of the fact that on that version, the recently departed Lizzie Bravo and Gayleen Peace are indeed on that version, as opposed to the the Spectorized one.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right, very quickly, your thoughts about just the remix of Let It Be from Giles Martin, what you thought of it, Was it, you know, everything you wanted? Is it a vast improvement? What do you think? Al, we'll start with you.
I think I thought it was excellent, absolutely excellent. Like I said, the version of the Long and Winding Road sounds fabulous. You know, as does the version of Across the Universe, even though it's not the desired version.
For
But
you.
yeah, exactly. For me,
I like all of
exactly.
them. You know, it's a,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Especially, I've got a feeling, and One After 909 sound fabulous. I mean, they've got so much punch to them.
Mhm.
You know, I think just overall, it's just very, very well done. You know, which is consistent with, you know, with his work on the last three
Yeah.
um,
Right.
packages.
Yeah. But also,
Tom?
you know, he's had a chance to work with these very masters, right? When with Let It Be Naked, right? So the songs like I Got a Feeling, One After 909 that have that punch that you point out, Al.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He's already been at the wheel for these. You know, and
Mhm.
kind of, you know, had a good running start. I would agree with you. I think probably the word I would use to describe it sounds a bit more even. It's not a doesn't come across
Yes.
as disjointed as I was talking about before, where the
Hmm.
stark differences, let's say, between two of us acoustic, Long and Winding Road orchestrated, Maggie May off the cuff, you know, and Across the Universe, you know, speed varied and everything else.
Hmm.
I think the album sounds a lot more even. I really I
Yeah.
like it. And to your point, Al, what he's brought to each of the master recordings. Never mind the demos, never mind the outtakes. What
Hmm.
he's brought to each of the master recordings is hard to argue with. I mean, from Pepper to White to Abbey Road, and now to Let It Be. Let It Be, I think, was a little harder to do because there wasn't as much soup to play with, right? There wasn't all the,
Exactly.
well, I'll bring up the horns. Well, there are no horns, you know,
Right.
or,
Hmm.
Right.
you know, I mean, let's say compared to Pepper or Abbey Road
Hmm.
or something like that. But yeah, I think he's done another remarkable job here.
Well,
And you
Tom,
can?
may I echo those words?
Yes, you may. So I was just going to say, and you can. You know, we get to interview you too here on the channel. You know.
Well, I pretty much have said what the two of you have said. I'm really, you know, I've had two different experiences listening to the remix. One is in the car where I wasn't thoroughly impressed, but when I listen with the headphones on, it's a whole different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And, you know, I'm going back again to what we talked about and things we said today. There's so many things that I hear clearer now,
Mm-hmm.
especially like the harmonies between John and Paul and two of us, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and Alan's saying to me, it was always there.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe it's just much more apparent in this new mix.
Yep.
And certainly the rockers have much more, you know, presence, more bite, more punch. You know,
Much.
Take a Pony, I've Got a Feeling, One After 909. I think that Giles was respectful to Phil Spector's production, although I still feel like the trumpet in The Long and Winding Road is a little bit distant. You
Mm.
know, it doesn't seem to be as hot in the mix as it was before. But then again, I could listen again with these headphones and hear it differently. It's just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a strange thing, you know. A lot depends upon the stereo system that you're listening on too, sometimes,
Yeah.
and if you're listening with your headphones on. But overall, I think that Giles has mastered the art of pleasing the people who are more purists, who don't want that much change, and some fans that want some change but not that much, and somewhere being in the middle. So, you know, you will hear things that you haven't heard before because it's much clearer. It's a fuller sound overall, but you won't feel like he's really changed the mix all that much,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, he's loyal to it, but he's done another great job for sure.
Hmm. Now I
Mm.
did listen to the. Now I don't have 5.1, but so I did listen to the. I guess it was the which mix
The
was it?
the
For the
Blu-ray
TV.
audio of the album.
Yeah, well, there's three mixes on there. Now I'm forgetting which one I listened to. I
The
think
high
it was the
res, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was right. Yeah. Anyway, listen to it.
The one
And
that's not in 5.1.
yes, exactly, exactly. The one that's not exactly the
Is it
one's
Dolby
not.
Atmos?
That's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, okay.
See what you guys have to look forward to when you get to this age.
I'm getting there myself,
Oof. You
faster
got a
than you
ways to
think.
go. Yeah. But anyway, it sounds, it doesn't, there's not a great difference, but it sounds fine.
Mhm.
There's not a great difference from what the remixed album sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Professor Kozin, gave us the rundown on the on the 5.1 on things we said today, but
Hmm. Yeah.
because Tom, you don't have 5.1, do
I
you?
don't know. I
Okay.
looked, still just these 2 ears, so
Yeah,
I'm good with stereo.
exactly. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I still don't have 5.1, and it's not because I don't want it. It's because the house
Hmm.
that I live in is a cape and it's very
Yeah,
small. And if you're going to
yeah,
have it, you might as well have it in a living room with a lot of space, and you can separate the speakers.
Yeah.
It kind of loses its
exactly.
purpose if it's in a
Right.
small room.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I've listened to some of them in 5.1, like Pepper. My brother has the whole setup, and I mean, it's a listening experience because you're going, oh wait, over there I can hear the sitar or whatever, and wait, over there I can hear just the voices. And if you want to focus in on, just the voices or something, that's I mean, it's just like hog heaven.
hmm,
I like to
Mm.
listen to it. I mean, again, it's just a listening preference. I like to hear the whole thing. Yes, I like to isolate things now and again, but my listening experience is the whole song, the whole thing, and how it all
Exactly.
interacts. So stereo does me
Mm.
just fine.
Yep.
oh, I agree with
Yeah.
you there. But there are times I love listening to isolated tracks and hear
Oh
things that
no,
you
look,
never heard
Oh,
before.
sure.
no, look, when you listen to the Love album in 5.1,
Yes.
home run.
Mm.
Okay, big
Yeah.
home run. Because it's the design of the product is that, yes, you'll have, drive my car over there, and you'll have what you're doing over there, and you'll
Mhm.
have taxman behind you and whatever else. Yeah, then it's meant to immerse you in all those differences as opposed to all those similarities.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Any criticism that you would make of this box set?
I was actually, I think probably Tom and I think we because we've talked about this, and I think we were just a little underwhelmed by the two rarities discs
Hmm.
because especially, I mean, Tom, he and Alan know as much about those that month of
Yeah. The
of
winter of
rehearsed
discontent.
the winter of discontent as any people I've ever come in contact with, and I think there was probably there was really so much more that they could have probably another disc with some of the material that Tom was talking about before, Susie
Yeah.
Parlor, yes, things like that.
Yeah.
Probably would have spiced it up a little bit more. I think they kind of played it safe in
Hmm.
going with material that the general audience
Yeah.
would know.
Yeah, I think I think I'd probably just rephrase it, but make the same point. A couple of
Hmm.
different titles. When you look down the track list, it's "I Me Mine" and "Dig It" and whatever. Some of those titles, I think. I mean, think about the previous boxes, right? So you take the White Album, a great example. Oh, what's this? Circles. What's this? Sour Milk Sea.
Hmm.
You're So Square. And then even songs that we know but we don't know them from the White Album. Whatever is on there, Across the Universe. You don't know that from the White Album.
Right.
You get enough of that here because there's probably 5 songs or something that end up on Abbey Road, right? So
Right.
you do get that, but they are familiar. Here come the air quotes titles. They're familiar titles. The version of Bathroom Window or Polythene Pam that's on here, you know, very believable early takes. It makes a great point that, hey, they had so many songs coming out of them at this point. At the end of the day, for a single album, there was just no room at the inn for some of these songs.
Or they weren't fully developed.
Right, they're not fully where we talked about that on the
Yeah.
forum the other night. Why wasn't Octopus's Garden on here? Well, you can hear he's not done with it.
Yeah.
He's clearly not done with it. You know, you can hear it on, you know, on the Abbey Road box, he's barely done with it, right? On the outtake that's in there, right? He doesn't, you know, the rhythm of the middle part, he's not quite nailed down yet. So, I mean, there are reasons, but clearly some of the, you know, take like the rock and roll, you know, standards in there, right? So on Anthology, we made the point before that version of Oh Darling is in the Anthology, but here it's unedited, remixed, and, you know, a minute and a half longer, whatever it is. You take something like, and it's a great moment from the movie, from the Let It Be movie, Rip It Up, Shake, Rattle, and Roll, Kansas City, Miss Ann. That little section of oldies is great. They edit it on the Anthology. You get some of the Rip It Up, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. You don't get Kansas City, Miss Ann, and they bump it up to Blue Suede Shoes or something. Hearing that one unedited, I think, would have been a whole lot of fun. People would have got a good charge out of that. But again, only because we have had a window into this soul through 96 hours of bootlegs or whatever we have gotten, can we say that. We wouldn't be having this conversation when the Sgt. Pepper box came out, because just hearing an alternate take of Lovely Rita or When I'm 64 was a thrill in and of itself, because we never heard any of that stuff.
Right.
So I think they struck a good balance between keeping it saleable, right? And Giles made that point in the recent Variety article. As I'm reading it, I'm saying, I hope he's not talking about me. He says, there are people out there who want everything. Well, you know, those who want everything, you know, the whole, and it is 83 discs, folks, the complete set of at least what's shown up to date. It's 83 discs. It's 96 hours. If you want it, it's out there. No one, not me, not Alan Kozin, not anybody would suggest that this should have been a 96 disc set. Nobody. There are hours at a time where there's no music in those sets, where they're, you know, like the stuff you hear sampled here, they're deciding what to get for lunch, okay? Or they're talking about, are we going to film tomorrow? Are we ready to do a concert? Are we going to take it on the boat? What are we? And no one's saying it should be that. The jackpot question: how many versions of Don't Let Me Down are there? More than you could ever want to hear. It is over 100. No one is suggesting that. You know, one of the quote complaints that I've heard from a lot of people, and again, because sometimes the stories get mixed, right? We've been hearing we're going to get to hear the whole Rooftop concert. That's going to be in the Get Back movie. I think some people expected that to be in this set.
In the audio set.
And frankly, Ken, you made the perfect point before. There are only 5 different songs they performed on the roof. It's 11 performances of 5 songs. On a CD or an album, you don't want to hear 3, you know, like, okay, that was all right, but, you know, a little flat there on the chorus. Let's come back and do Get Back again or something. In the movie, that'll be interesting to see, because you want to see how it unfolded and how people are reacting, and it adds a whole nother dimension to it. On the album, and frankly, the 5 titles, I think we have one of each, you know, through either the anthology, well, not just the film, but audio-wise, you have them either on the Let It Be album,
right,
on the anthology, or on Let It Be Naked. You have one of each, you know, of the 5 songs that would otherwise make for, quote, the live album. So I'm not terribly upset about that, though.
Well, you know, just to play devil's advocate, there's always going to be people out there that want everything they've ever committed to tape.
All 96 hours, knock yourself out.
Because they're the Beatles, and they're the most important and most influential band and greatest band of all time. There are people who think that way. You know, and also I'm sure there's some people who think, yeah, why not have a CD of the Apple Rooftop with repeating these songs, because that's a part of history. That's the way it was. You know, there are times when certain things have been released because of its historical value,
Mhm.
like That'll Be the Day and In Spite of All the Danger.
Yep.
Okay, I think that serves a purpose, a very important
Sure.
songs there. Not the greatest sound quality in the world, but I'm glad that it's on there on the Beatles anthology. How about the Quarrymen recordings from 1960 that's on the Beatles anthology? Not the
Well,
greatest
they
recordings.
picked the wrong hunk of that tape to put out. That's for sure.
Mm.
Because the completed songs that are, again, out there on these, public domain discs, I find that set of recordings, and again, time for the quick plug, I've played a number of them on Way Beyond Compare. Played the early version of I'll Follow the Sun.
Right.
The early version of Hello Little Girl. The early version of One After 909. I find it fascinating to listen to, let's say, I'll Follow the Sun from 1960.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, that's important. Okay, for a minute and 40 seconds or however long it runs, it makes the point of, hey, that song, which everybody loved when it came out on Beatles for Sale at the end of 1964, was written when they were kids. They were kids at this
Mhm.
point.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what makes that cool.
Well, then you could also take a lot of stuff from the Let It Be sessions of early Lennon and McCartney songs
Oh yeah,
that they worked on and put that
Sure.
into a little package too.
yeah. Well, I said before, we talked about they did a lot of oldies during the Let It Be sessions. Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Carl Perkins, Elvis, all of that. They also did Lennon and McCartney songs,
Right.
early Lennon and McCartney songs. So they're in there.
So that's one of the few gripes that I have, and believe me, I applaud this box set to the hilt. But the 2 discs of outtakes you could have fit on one CD.
I know.
Right.
It's 42 minutes on the first and something like 30 minutes on the second.
Yeah.
You could have put the
Yeah.
4 extra tracks from the EP. You could have added that to Glyn Johns. You could have
Yeah.
made what was a 6-disc set a 4-disc set and brought
Yep.
down the cost there. But apart from that, you could have had a few interesting themes working in
Yep.
the box set, like songs that they worked on that eventually made it on their solo albums, even if they're little snippets, like
Yeah.
Another Day,
Yep.
or Backseat of My Car. You
Yep.
already have Give Me Some Truth. Why can't you
Yep.
have the others? Or the ones that George worked on
Mhm.
that were on All Things Must Pass, like Hear Me Lord. You could have done something like that. You could have had some of the best of the 50s rock and roll and oldies.
Yep.
They could have done things like that. I'm not saying a 10-disc set. You could have condensed it all to another 1 or 2 more discs. That's all that I'm saying.
That, or
Yeah,
if you wanted to make it a form of substitution, there were bits in that 75-minute collective, set of outtakes that have been out before. We talked about Oh Darlin', but
Mhm.
even that bit, the Maggie May and Fancy Me Chances, that was all on that Fly on the Wall disc.
Yeah.
Right.
Back with Let It Be Naked. So was there a reason to put that bit out? I know it's 90 seconds long, but was there a need for that? I guess you got to define the term need.
Mm.
But the stuff that we had heard before, obviously for the collectors, that's more of a meh kind of moment. But a lot. I mean, that has to be the least listened to disc in my Beatle official
Yeah.
collection is Fly on the Wall. How often do you go listen to
Yeah.
that?
You know what I listened to
Once.
from that?
Yeah.
One song. Because I Know You Love
Because
Me
I know,
So.
yeah, right. Because it
it's-
runs a minute long. It's a nice uncut piece right there. Yeah.
I know. They could have added that, even though it's already on Let It Be Naked. They could have put that in the box set.
Yeah.
So
As far as the time element, the story I hear is that apparently it was decreed from up either at Apple, either Apple brass or more likely Universal brass, basically decreed that the LP set and the CD set were to be uniform.
I
So
heard that
that's
as well,
why.
yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that as well.
Yeah.
okay.
So, so it's it's unfortunate, but
Yeah, it's unfortunate till you go look at your John Lennon boxes for Imagine and Plastic Ono Band and try and
Yeah.
figure out what
Sure.
songs are on what discs. It's like
Yes.
CD3 and Blu-ray 1, you get this. You don't get the
Right.
ones with the asterisks on it. It's like trying to figure out where this stuff is. No, it's very neat and tidy. That's a big plus this
Yeah.
time through. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more material on the Lennon box sets of
Oh
outtakes
yeah, I
now.
mean
So
it's
yeah,
chock
Exactly.
full of
and
Yeah.
I
them.
and I care more
Sure.
about that because to me, and I might change my opinion about this. As much as I like the remixes, the first thing I go to are the outtakes as soon as these
Of course, me too.
box sets
Absolutely.
come out. That's my
Absolutely.
main interest of all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So I guess we can say on a scale of 1 to 10, well, how would you rate the box set, Al?
Hmm. Okay. I would say I would give it a 6. I mean, I really
Really?
like, yeah, I really like I like the remix. I like the Glyn Johns acetate mix. Uh, um, as you can probably tell, and on the two outtakes discs, but I do like the material on the EP. So this, it it loses points on for the what it's supposed to be basically the attraction for most people probably, which is the outtake material.
Hmm.
So it loses points on there. So
Hmm.
give it a 6.
Okay. Tom, are you in agreement?
I would rate it higher. Um, I'm a guy that, when I buy let's say a greatest hits album, I don't know, for some reason there could be 20 songs on it. I go, "Oh, but look what they left off." Okay? And in this box, I think any of my, and I will use this term very loosely, any dissatisfaction, but it's really not that, but anything that I'm not glowing about is for what's not in it. Okay, but to grade it on what is in it, I'd go a little higher. I'd go with an 8. It would, to me, it would lose a couple points. Well, let me start at 10 and work backwards. The Giles mix is a 10. Having the Glyn Johns record is a 10. Okay, the packaging and the book and everything else, 10s. Where did it lose a point or two? Yeah, the quantity of the outtakes is pretty skimpy.
Yes.
And then, I'm gonna put on my, Beatle nerd red line and deduct a point for for what types of things they left on the table. The rock and roll oldies and even a couple of other original titles, Susie Parler and Watching Rainbows and all that. So I might knock 2 points off of that, but an 8 is solid, where I would look at something like the Abbey Road box and the White Album box and the Pepper box, 10.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's the other
I have,
thing. Yeah. Right.
home run right across the board, and nothing to take off. If I was going to argue about
question.
anything in the Let It Be box, give me more. Okay, it's just
Yeah.
that it wasn't long enough.
Right.
That's, and that, by the way, makes it a 10. Is that it leaves you wanting more. So, and
Right.
you, Ken, where would you? What's the 10 pointer on you?
Pretty much what you said, Tom. I would give it an 8. But the only thing is I'm still not big on the Glyn Johns mix.
Okay.
But I love what Giles Martin did. And for me, the highlight are those 2 discs of outtakes, no matter what. The sound quality is superb on all of it.
Sure.
I love hearing different takes of the same songs, even when they're close. Yeah, because it's still exciting to
Yeah.
hear a different take of "I've Got a Feeling," which is pretty darn close to the released version. Tells you, how close they were to reaching, the perfect take. And that version could have just as well have been the one that was released
Right.
anyway,
That's
like
the
you were saying.
marvel. Yeah.
Yeah. Just knowing that. But I also said before, I like hearing the evolution of songs. And that's when I learn things about the Beatles music, when I learn things about early versions of the songs where certain things aren't finished or they tried things that didn't work, that's where the Beatles anthology excels for
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
Like I always like to bring up I'll Be Back when they're doing it in 3/4 time, and it's like, why did
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
That's
even
right. And they
try
just,
this?
yeah. Right.
It doesn't matter if it's not that good. It's what's fascinating is that they tried it that way. whatever they experimented with, whether it worked or not,
Right.
that's what I like to learn about. And so, yeah, I would have liked the faster version of Two of Us on here.
Yeah.
I would have liked any different arrangement of these songs. And
Right.
just to know, I mean, everybody knows that Dig a Pony starts off with the All I Want Is You and Phil Spector
Yeah.
chopped it off, but
Yeah.
some people may not know that.
Yeah.
You know, just to know that that was changed to the song.
Mm.
You know, I think it was a shock to some people many years ago to learn that I Mean Mine was only really a minute and a
Yeah.
half.
Right. That
Sure.
is
And
extended. Yeah.
and I think what Phil
Yeah.
Spector did was brilliant, you know,
Yeah.
adding, you
Mhm.
know, editing the last verse and putting that in there to make it 220, whatever it was. You know, I like learning about those things. The thing is about the songs that ended up on Let It Be, there weren't too many changes that were made to the
Mm.
arrangements of the songs. They were pretty close. And even then, that's a learning experience. I remember talking about when the anthology came out and there was that take of Come Together, and I think it was take one, and it's pretty darn close to what they were going to release anyway. Just knowing that they
Mm.
had that in the back of their
Yep.
minds, they knew what the arrangement was going to be. That's
Mhm.
educational,
Yeah.
learning that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what I like to learn. And also, you know, I haven't heard all the Let It Be bootleg stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that's really fascinating. I like to hear songs in their infancy when they're not completely finished. I heard Paul working on Golden Slumbers and Carry That Weight on the piano alone
Mhm.
early on, you know, and figure this is January. He's starting to write this. It doesn't come out till Abbey Road many, many months before. I
Mhm.
find that interesting. You could have added
Mhm.
some of this stuff on there for a third disc. Actually, they should have still condensed, to me anyway, those two discs
Yeah.
to one.
Yeah.
But you could have had two more discs of unreleased stuff. So that's the only fault that I would find, like you guys have said
Mhm.
with this. Anyway, so I think that sums up everything we have to say about Let It Be. So before we go, to make sure I don't forget, Tom, tell us a little more in detail about these shows that you do on Sirius XM.
Okay, so the one I've been part of since the channel launched in 2017 is a show called the Fab Fourum. I serve there as their kind of their resident Beatles expert. We have Dennis Elsis, who any of your listeners from the New York area, I'm sure, are familiar with from his long stint at WNEW. He's our host. We have Bill Flanagan, who had a long and celebrated career at Musician Magazine and at VH1 and MTV networks. They're your hosts, and I join them. I'm kind of like, you know, when you watch a football game, you got the two guys in the booth, and then you got the guy down on the field telling you, you know, what happened to that guy who just got injured, whatever.
What's really happening?
Yeah, it's really happening. So that goes out live Wednesday nights. We are still doing it live. It's 9:00 Eastern on Wednesday nights, and then it repeats Saturday morning at 7 and Sunday at 6 p.m. All of those are Eastern times. We have guests. I mean, you know, the people I've gotten to talk to in the past 5 years about the Beatles. I mean, you know, talking with, I don't know, Pete Townsend or Billy Joel or Little Steven or Graham Nash about the Beatles is kind of a good night. I mean, it's really, really fantastic. So that's the Fab Forum. And then coming up on 1 year that we do the weekly Way Beyond Compare Rarities show. It's a half hour a week. It premieres on Monday at 2:00 and then repeats on Tuesday night, Friday afternoon, and Sunday morning. And it's a half hour of basically, it's not, well, here's a rare album track for you. It's stuff that's, without giving it a strict definition, stuff that's not on released, you know, catalog albums. You will go to charity records, various artist records, songs that they wrote for other people, songs that they guested on for other people, different mixes, B-sides. We won't play any songs from the Tug of War album, which you know I love, Ken, but we will go into that Tug of War box, and any of the outtakes, demos, B-sides, alternate mixes, that's all fair game. And of course, it's group and solo stuff. So we have tons of fun with Way Beyond Compare for a half hour every week. And the third one, which we talked about briefly before, is Apple Jam, which I do with David Frick, who is just a brilliant guy to work with. That premieres the first Wednesday of every month and plays throughout the weekend following. And then, as I said, it's off for a week, and then the schedule repeats the following week. The punchline to all of these, they're always available to Sirius XM subscribers on the app. You can listen to them anytime you want. But so it's 3 shows a week. It's a good deal of fun, and every now and again I find myself wandering the halls over there, and I end up somewhere else, either on the Springsteen channel or filling in for Meg Griffin or whatever else is available. I'll take care of. But those are the 3 shows. The last 2, as I say, are coming up on a year. They both started in December of last year. And the Fab Fourum, we're now in year 5. We just did our something like 225th show the other night.
Okay, very good. I know that you're doing a whole bunch of Let It Be specials, at least this week.
Mm-hmm.
One of which I know is hosted by Kevin Howlett.
Yep.
Right.
The great Kevin Howlett. Yes.
Yes.
I love Kevin Howlett. When I got to go over, when the Abbey Road box set came out, I had the privilege of going over to Abbey Road for the party, with everybody from Paul and Ringo on down, and got there and was talking to some of the channel brass, and I said, gee, I really don't know many people here. It was mostly the English folks. And I said, well, Kevin Howlett's over there. Do you know him? And I've admired Kevin's work for ages. He is the BBC radio guru. His first book on them was fascinating enough. The big one that came in the box with all the replica contracts and stuff is indispensable. Kevin does a lot of work for the channel. Typically when a new project like this comes out, he's done them for Pepper and Abbey Road and the White Album, and now Let It Be. He did a 2-part special, runs 2 hours, interviews, selections from the box, and just a great historical perspective. Kevin is he's really a great asset to the channel. Oh,
major name in the Beatle world. And I remember Steve Marinucci and I interviewed him.
Yep.
I think when Live at the BBC 2 came out on Things We Said Today.
Yep.
But and a lot of what you do in Way Beyond Compare reminds me of some of what I've done over the years on my Beatles show, because as you know, I apologize to people if I've repeated this so many times, but the book altogether now was such a big influence on me as a discography. And one of the things that I loved the most was to learn about what I always called side projects of the Beatles, songs they wrote for the people, performed on for the people, produced for other people.
Right.
And I learned about all that stuff through that book. And then I would go to the fest and try and hunt down those very same songs, although now you can find a lot of them on YouTube anyway.
Of course.
I love that. It's a whole other dimension of the Beatles world to know what they did for other artists.
Yeah, I mean, it's such, and if you're familiar with the books by Chris Englehart, The Beatles Undercover, there are 2 full books.
I know, I have them.
Guest appearances, songs they wrote for other people, duets, right down the line. There's plenty to pick from. I'm actually priding myself. I just recorded the 50th show, which brings me to a year because there was a couple weeks off for holiday scheduling or whatever. But rounding the first year, didn't repeat a song once. So we made it through a year without, I'm not saying we're, year 2, we won't dip back in, but the first year we did not repeat a single track. So,
well, as a matter of fact, there was actually the kind of the genesis for what we're doing right now comes from a Way Beyond Compare show just recently, where you wrapped the show up by playing Same Time Next Year.
Yeah.
Which reminded me of those end of year shows that we did with Ken.
The DHA days.
It was always the last song I played.
And that was always the last song.
Well,
so that
I'm going to wax poetic on WDHA, the Ken Michaels All Request Beatles show, which I was privileged to be a guest on for, the year-end specials or a new release, or just, hey, come on and let's yak about what's going on in Beatleland, a Paul tour or whatever. My very favorite memory of those, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, when the McCartney Russian album came out. Getting copy, it was not like today where you posted and you downloaded or whatever. You had to order it. It had to come into the country and go through customs and everything else. And I got a call on a Friday from whatever import dealer I was dealing with, saying that they had gotten them in, and I had to give them my credit card number to to ship it and everything, and they said, and you'll have it, we're going to use like UPS 2-day stuff, and you'll have it Monday. I said, no, whatever it is, FedEx it. If it's another $20 or whatever it is, FedEx, I need to have this by tomorrow. And I brought it to the studios, and we played Bring It On Home to Me in the first 10, 15 minutes, whatever a set was at that point. We said, and Tom's here today, and we're going to yak about the Beatles, and we got a couple surprises for you, and blah, 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 blah. And we played that, and it was like you were giving away a car. All the lights on the phone just lit up, and everyone asked, is this what we've been hearing about? Because it was something you heard about. It wasn't you didn't get it on release day. It had to come into the country and get shipped, and it wasn't going to come out in America anyway. And how do you get a record out of Russia? You can't get people out of Russia. How are you going to get albums out, right? And the phones lit up, and people just went nuts. I remember that, and I remember one of your friends, like a good listener, I want to say his name was Mike, said, mind if I come down afterwards and make a tape of that?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Mike Kelly, right? Was that his name?
That's right. I'm still in touch with
him.
him. Yeah.
Don't ask me what I had for breakfast, but I remember that. And I remember that being a really good and fun day at WDHA.
Without a doubt, the best times you ever have on the radio is when you're premiering a song.
Or doing an exclusive,
Yeah, there's nothing quite like that. But I also, and I'm trying to remember if you were there for this, but one of the most memorable shows I ever did, and I did a lot of stuff with Lost Lennon Tapes material.
Oh, yeah.
I did alternate Imagine albums and Mind Games albums. And, because for those of you that don't know this, who are watching this, when my show, I started off as a 2-hour show from 8 to 10. It then got expanded to 7 to 10. And then at some point, we took the Lost Lennon Tapes, the syndicated radio show.
That's right.
We aired that at 6 in the morning.
Yep.
And I had to engineer that. Right. So for 4 hours, we had Beatle programming. And I had access to all the Lost Lennon Tapes albums, the vinyl albums. And I got to play, and also bootleg versions.
Of
without
course.
Elliot Mintz's voice on them.
Yeah.
And I got to, do a lot of very creative things with that. But I also did a BBC special where it was a BBC A to Z. And so much of that stuff I had on vinyl, on CD, on cassette, and on reel to reel. And I had to maneuver the whole thing, and nobody was there who could really touch any of the equipment except for me. And I didn't want to have any dead air in between songs.
Right.
It wasn't that easy, especially queuing up cassettes. So,
and those carts, remember you had those, they looked like little 8-track tapes, those little carts that you had some of the stuff on there. I remember all that, sure.
That shows how far back I go.
Yeah.
Carts.
Yeah.
But
I think the first song you played, Ken, in your radio career was Look, I've Invented Fire, right? Was that the
probably. I go that far back, with Caveman. I should be with Ringo. I should have been with Ringo and Caveman, really.
Yeah. Well, look, we just had a nice chat with Ringo. Well, only because you brought up Caveman. I mentioned a bunch of people before, like Billy Joel and people like that. But this past summer was the true highlight. I got to do a one-on-one with Ringo, where we talked about this, that 1981 period, 80 and 81 recording Stop and Smell the Roses, which is an album I love.
Right.
But so much was happening there. And you got a nice round 40th anniversary. He, marries Barbara. They're now married 40 years. The fact that Paul and George are on it, that John was to be on it, that he's working with his great friend Harry Nielsen. And music is changing at that point. MTV has come out. They make that 3-song video mini movie with songs from that. It was an interesting story how, we wouldn't just wake up one day and say, let's do a Stop and Smell the Roses special. It was, if you got time for a great story, Ringo, one of his production team heard something we played on the air. It was that version of Back Off Boogaloo from Stop and Smell the Roses. And this person said, I recorded that and I played it for Ringo. He says he's never heard that. Is this something you guys put together? And we said, no. And we told him what it was. And he's like, wow, it's really, really good. I'm like, yeah, I know it's really, really good. Obviously, he and Nielsen, were in some state back then.
Right.
It's obviously he has heard it. He's forgotten it. We got him. He said, "Can you get us a copy?" Blah blah blah. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's a really good record, by the way. This, Sure to Fall, one of my favorite Ringo tracks from the entire catalog. Him with Paul, by the way, making a nice duet. And
Yeah.
we pointed out all those things. 40 years, and that there's two other Beatles on it, and there was plans to be a third, and and it's a really good record, and it was Ringo's birthday coming up, and we needed some ideas for some fresh Ringo programming. And I said, why don't we ask him if he would do that? And I said, just remember who got you that track. Remember, that was me. Okay, don't forget. And 2 days later, we get word back from his camp. He's into it. He'll talk about that album. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And the thing I think that made it fun, and his people told me this, and frankly, Ringo told me this at the end, was that we kept to the script. It wasn't, Ken, you've seen this happen. I know you have. People say, oh, Ringo's got a new album. Let's interview him. Ringo, you've got a new album. How is it different than when you recorded with the Beatles? They go right there. And he nobody likes to be sandbagged like that. We stuck. I told them, I said, as much as I'll talk about the Beatles as the fact that Paul and George are on the album, there's really little I can do about that. And we stuck to that script, and he, I think, appreciated that, and appreciated talking about an album that he doesn't get to talk about. When people say to Ringo, why don't you write your biography? Ringo, can we interview you for this Beatle book? He doesn't do them anymore, and he says quite pointedly, people just want to hear about the same 7 years of my life. Right? You've heard him say that.
Yes.
When he promotes other things. I told him we won't go there for sure. And we had great fun with him, and got great material out of him, and got him to cue up the songs, and we kind of put a whole new coat of paint on Stop and Smell the Roses, one of my favorite Ringo records.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That the songs that Paul wrote on there, Attention and Private Property.
Terrific.
And Rack My Brain from George. Killer tracks, all of them. Definitely.
It's a terrific album, top to bottom. It really
is. And some of the bonus tracks that ended up on the CD from The Right Stuff are really pretty good.
We played Red, White, and Blues, on the and you got Nice Way, I guess, was actually on the album.
Yep.
We played, I think,
Brandy.
Red, White, and Blues, on Way Beyond Compare. So it's good because we can kind of cross, use that stuff across the different shows.
Right.
So like when we, I had done we had what's called a town hall with James Taylor at one point, and I had asked some questions about Apple, which he was not only gracious enough to answer, but picked up the guitar and showed how he did them, which was great. When we did Apple Jam and we're doing a little bit about James Taylor, we said, by the way, James swung by not long ago, and we're able to kind of use that, and it really helps color in the programming. It really does.
No, he seems very willing to talk about the Apple days.
Sure.
And very proud of it, as he should be.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And of course, it's also the start of his working with Peter Asher. So
yeah. Yeah. So, there's been, I've had nothing but fun there for 5 years. They're a great team of people, and working with, a lot goes through Apple. It's obviously an Apple sanctioned and, co-branded, kind of setup. And that's had a lot of benefits too. As I said before, going to the Abbey Road, celebration over there. I mean, that was kind of a great night.
Oh, sure.
I can't lie to you. So all of that has really made being part of the Beatles channel really rewarding.
All right, great. Continued success, Tom.
Thank you, my friend.
That's Sirius, and with the channel. And Al, to remind everybody, you have a new piece in Beatlefan about Let It Be. And like we said before, the new book from Bruce Spicer, where you've written a piece. The book is on Magical Mystery Tour and Yellow Submarine.
Yellow Submarine, and that period.
Right.
As far as the new issue of Beatlefan, normally it would actually the issue would have actually been out probably the end of September, but because of the approaching release of the book and the CD package, we wanted to get as much coverage as possible.
Right.
And Bill had asked me to do kind of a historical background piece as kind of a scene setter. But along with that, we have an interview with Giles Martin. We have an interview with Glyn Johns. We have a track by track rundown of, I'm not sure if it's just the remix or the whole box by Bruce Beiser. We have a kind of a quickie review of the box by Brad Hunt. And there's several other pieces, including a review of a certain book of lists of monster movies by a certain Mr. Rosenet, who I believe we're all somewhat familiar with.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it's a nice little crossover piece. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got 9 people in the book who are, connected to the Beatles, including Pete Best. So
yeah.
Right. And so the issue should be out just about any day now.
Yep.
And Bruce's book, the On Magical Mystery Tour and Yellow Submarine, which, as I mentioned, it's what I call the Beatles album series team of myself, Bill King, Frank Daniels, Pierce Hevingson, and Bruce. It's if you've liked the previous books going back to Sgt. Pepper, you'll love this one.
Yep.
It's very, very well done. And I also just did a gig of as a kind of a fact checker and some editor for Jude Kessler's 5th volume in the John Lennon series called Shades of Life.
She is tireless when it comes to John.
Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Glad to see you so active. And and we're looking forward to having you back on. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you about the book with Bruce, either with Bruce or you alone. We'll see. But that'll be great. And I'd love to have the 2 of you back on.
Yeah, this is great fun.
Anytime.
Yep. Yeah. Great fun.
As you can tell, this studio is a replica of WDHA behind me.
Yes.
Including the window.
Yeah, mine is the replica of the one Magic Alex built. I don't have any electrical outlets.
Guys, this has been great, and hope we can do this again real soon.
Let's definitely do that.
Absolutely.
Great fun.
Yeah.
And
great fun, Ken. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you for watching. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, and we will see you not same time next year. We'll see you next time. Okay, take care.
Peace.
Bye-bye.